They say every woman dreams of her wedding day. But on the morning Elena Whitford was meant to walk down the aisle, she learned the horrifying truth. Her marriage wasn't a celebration. It was a trap. Her guardian had sold her future to a ruthless nobleman who planned to lock her away in an asylum and steal everything she owned. With riders already searching the estate in minutes until the ceremony, Elena made a choice that would change everything. She ran, and when she climbed into a stranger's carriage to hide, she had no idea she'd just thrown herself into the path of England's most dangerous duke. If you want to see how a desperate bride became the most powerful duchess in England, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The grandfather clock in Hartmore Estate's Grand Hall struck 6, and Elena Whitford's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood before the full-length mirror in her childhood bedroom, staring at the reflection of a stranger. The wedding gown was exquisite, layers of Belgian lace over silk so fine it whispered with every breath, seed pearls sewn into patterns that caught the early morning light. Her dark hair had been arranged in elaborate curls, woven through with white ribbons and tiny diamond pins that had belonged to her mother. She looked every inch the perfect bride. She looked like a lamb dressed for slaughter. "Miss Elena, you're pale as death." Mrs. Iris Pemberton set down the jewelry box she'd been holding and moved closer. Her weathered face creased with concern. The elderly woman had been Elena's governess since childhood, and later her companion when formal education ended. She was the only person in this house who had ever truly cared. "Are you unwell? Shall I fetch—" "No!" Elena's voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it. "No doctors. No one. Iris, please, lock the door." The older woman's eyes widened, but she obeyed, turning the heavy brass key with a decisive click. When she faced Elena again, her expression had shifted from concern to alarm. "Child, what's happened?" Elena's fingers fumbled with the buttons at her throat. The gown suddenly felt suffocating. "I overheard them last night. Uncle Frederick and Lord Barrington. I couldn't sleep, so I went down to the library for a book, and I heard voices in Uncle's study. The door was cracked open just enough—" "What did you hear?" Iris's voice had gone very quiet. "Everything." The word came out broken. "Uncle Frederick has been planning this for months. The marriage to Lord Barrington isn't what everyone thinks. It's not an advantageous match or a strategic alliance. It's a conspiracy." She could still hear their voices, low and satisfied, drifting through the crack in the study door. Her uncle's distinctive wheeze when he laughed, Barrington's cold, measured tones, the clink of brandy glasses. 2 months, Elena continued, the words tumbling out faster now. That's how long Barrington promised to wait after the wedding. 2 months of playing the doting husband. Then he'll start the rumors, whispers that I'm behaving strangely, that I'm having episodes, fits of hysteria. He has a doctor already prepared to examine me, a Dr. Whitmore, who specializes in disorders of the female mind. For the right price, this doctor will declare me mentally unstable and recommend immediate institutionalization. Iris had gone white. He wouldn't dare. He's done it before. Elena's voice cracked. 3 times before. 3 previous wives, all with substantial fortunes, all declared insane, all locked away in private asylums where no one could reach them. The first wife died within a year. The second lasted 18 months. The third is still alive, apparently, locked in some facility in Yorkshire, but she might as well be dead. No visitors allowed. No correspondence. Just gone. The older woman groped for the bed and sat down heavily. Your uncle knows all this? Uncle Frederick orchestrated it. The bitterness in Elena's laugh surprised even her. He's drowning in gambling debts, mortgages on estates he's already lost, loans from men who won't wait much longer. Barrington offered him £30,000 for my hand in marriage, £30,000 and forgiveness of an additional $20,000 in debts. In exchange, Uncle delivers me to the altar, vouches for my virtue and sound mind, and then conveniently discovers he can no longer serve as my trustee once I'm a married woman. Everything transfers to Barrington, my inheritance, the properties my father left me, the investments, all of it. Nearly £200,000. Dear heaven, Iris pressed a hand to her mouth. I heard Barrington say... Elena's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I heard him say that I'm much prettier than the last one, and it will be a shame to lock me away so soon. Uncle Frederick laughed and said to enjoy the honeymoon while it lasts. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock. Each tick felt like a nail in a coffin. Finally, Iris stood, her jaw set with sudden determination. Then we leave. Now. This moment. How? Elena gestured helplessly at the window. There are servants everywhere. The guests have already started arriving. I can hear the carriages. In 3 hours, I'm supposed to walk down that aisle. Uncle Frederick has men watching all the doors. He says it's for security, but I know better. He's making sure I don't run. The east servants' entrance, Iris said quickly. The one near the old scullery. It's being refurbished, so no one's using it. If we're quick, they'll catch me in this. Elena looked down at the elaborate gown. I'll be visible from half a mile away. Iris was already moving, pulling open the wardrobe with swift efficiency. Your gray traveling dress, the plain one you wore on the trip to Bath last year. It's sensible, unremarkable. You can pass for a governess or a lady's maid. She paused, her hands stilling on the fabric. Elena, child, if we do this, there's no turning back. Your uncle will come after you. He has the law on his side. You're unmarried, under his guardianship until you reach 25 or wed. He can have you dragged back here in chains if he wishes. Then I'd rather die running than live as Barrington's prisoner. Something fierce and proud flickered in the old woman's eyes. That's my girl. That's Margaret's daughter speaking. She pulled out the gray dress, then grabbed a dark cloak and a simple bonnet. Change quickly. I'll pack a small bag. Just essentials. Money? I have the household allowance Uncle gave me last month, £60, and Mother's pearls hidden in my jewelry case. They're worth at least 200. Good. That will get you far from here. Iris was already gathering items, a hairbrush, undergarments, a spare dress, Elena's warmest shawl. Where will you go? Elena's hands froze on the buttons of her wedding gown. It was the question she'd been avoiding all night, tossing and turning in bed, staring at the canopy above her. I don't know. I have no one. Father's family disowned him when he married Mother, and Mother's family is all gone. I have some distant cousins in Scotland, but I haven't seen them since childhood, and I don't even know if they'd— First, we get you away from Hartmoor, Iris interrupted firmly. Then we worry about destinations. The morning coach to London leaves from the village at 7:30. If we hurry, you can be on it. From London, you can go anywhere. Scotland, the coast, even abroad if necessary. The wedding gown pooled at Elena's feet like discarded chains. She stepped out of it and reached for the plain gray traveling dress, her movements mechanical but purposeful. The simple wool felt rough after the silk, but it was freedom. It was choice. Iris helped her button it, then pinned the dark cloak at her throat. Your hair, it's too elaborate. Elena pulled out the diamond pins, letting the carefully arranged curls tumble loose. She scraped her hair back into a simple knot at the base of her neck, the kind any working woman might wear. When she looked in the mirror again, the transformation was startling. The grand lady had vanished. In her place stood someone ordinary, forgettable, perfect. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Miss Whitford? It was her uncle's valet, Grimsby. Your uncle requests your presence in the drawing room. The Archbishop has arrived to perform the ceremony, and Lord Barrington wishes to— Tell my uncle I'm still dressing, Elena called out, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The gown requires a few final adjustments. I'll be down shortly. A pause. He was quite insistent, miss. Nevertheless, I cannot appear before the Archbishop in my undergarments. Surely Uncle Frederick wouldn't wish me to compromise propriety. Another pause, longer this time. Then footsteps retreating down the corridor. That bought us 10 minutes at most, Iris whispered. She pressed the hastily packed bag into Elena's hands, then added a folded piece of paper. My sister's address in Bristol. If you're desperate, if you have nowhere else to turn, go there. Tell her I sent you. She'll help, I promise. Elena clutched the paper like a lifeline. Come with me. I can't, child. An old woman traveling with a young lady would be too memorable. Besides, someone needs to stay behind and delay them. I'll tell them you took ill suddenly, that you needed air, that I saw you walk toward the gardens, anything to send them in the wrong direction. They'll punish you. Let them try. Iris's smile was grim. I'm too old and too poor to be worth their trouble. Besides, I've wanted to tell your Uncle Frederick exactly what I think of him for 20 years. Today seems like an excellent day for honesty. Through the window, Elena could see more carriages arriving, guests in their finest attire stepping down onto the gravel drive. The sun was climbing higher. Time was bleeding away. Iris gripped her shoulders. Listen to me carefully. Once you're clear of the estate, stay off the main roads when you can. Keep the bonnet low. Don't speak to anyone unless absolutely necessary. If someone asks, you're a companion traveling to take up a new position. You're quiet, you're modest, and you're no one worth remembering. Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. And Elena? The old woman's voice softened. Your mother would be so proud of you. She was the bravest woman I ever knew, and you're just like her. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't let them lock you away. Not in an asylum, not in a marriage, not anywhere. You were born to be free. They embraced, quick and fierce. Then Iris unlocked the door, checked the corridor, and nodded. Now, go. Elena slipped into the hallway, her heart hammering so loud she was certain everyone in the house could hear it. The east wing was quieter. Most of the staff were concentrated in the main areas, preparing for the ceremony. She kept close to the walls, moving quickly but not running. Running would attract attention. The old servant's staircase was narrow and dark, smelling of must and plaster dust from the renovations. Her footsteps echoed too loud in the confined space. Down one flight, then another. The scullery entrance should be just ahead. Oi, you there! Elena's blood turned to ice. She turned slowly to find one of the footmen, a young man named Thomas, staring at her from the landing above. He looked confused. Miss Whitford, what are you doing in the servants' quarters? And dressed like— I needed air, Elena said quickly. The wedding nerves, you understand. I just wanted a moment alone, but I took a wrong turn and got lost. These old wings all look the same. Thomas descended the stairs, his confusion deepening. But miss, the ceremony is about to— Why are you wearing traveling clothes? Think. My wedding gown had a tear, a terrible tear in the train. Mrs. Pemberton is mending it now, but I couldn't just stand there in my undergarments, so I threw this on while I waited. But then I started feeling faint, and— She swayed slightly, pressing a hand to her forehead. He caught her arm, steadying her. Should I fetch the doctor? No, I just need air. If you could just help me to the garden door, I'll be fine. Please, Thomas, I'm so embarrassed. I don't want anyone to see me like this. The young man hesitated, clearly torn between helping and raising an alarm. Elena held her breath. The garden door's blocked off for the renovations, he said finally. But the scullery entrance is just down this corridor. Come on, I'll take you there. A few minutes outside will do you good. She could have wept with relief. Thomas guided her down the remaining stairs and through a dim corridor that smelled of old vegetables and soap. At the far end, a heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar, morning light visible through the gap. Here you are, miss. Thomas pushed the door open wider. Will you be all right? Should I wait with you? No, please. Elena managed a wan smile. I just need a moment alone. The fresh air will revive me. You should get back. They'll need everyone upstairs soon. He nodded, still looking uncertain, but finally turned and headed back toward the main house. Elena watched until he disappeared around the corner, then she ran. The scullery exit opened onto a rarely used path that skirted the kitchen gardens. At this hour, the gardeners were busy with the formal grounds near the house, preparing for the outdoor reception that was meant to follow the ceremony. No one saw her slip past the herb beds and through the gap in the hedge that led to the old orchard. Her lungs burned. The bag banged against her hip, but she didn't stop, not until she was deep among the gnarled apple trees, their spring blossoms raining down like snow with every gust of wind. She paused there, gasping, listening for sounds of pursuit. Nothing. Just birdsong and the distant sound of carriages on the main drive. She'd done it. She was off the estate grounds. But now what? The village was 2 miles east by the main road, but that was too exposed. Someone would spot her. She'd have to go cross-country, through the woods and fields, and pray she didn't encounter anyone who would remember a young woman traveling alone. Elena adjusted the bonnet, pulling it lower to shadow her face, and started walking. The woods were thick with morning fog, the ground soft from recent rain. Her boots, practical, thank heaven, not the ridiculous satin slippers meant for the wedding, squelched in the mud. Branches caught at her cloak. Once she nearly twisted her ankle on a hidden root. She thought of Iris facing down her uncle's rage. She thought of the guests arriving, expecting a wedding. She thought of Barrington standing at the altar, waiting for a bride who would never come. Let him wait. The forest eventually gave way to open farmland. Elena kept to the edges, using hedgerows and stone walls for cover. She saw a farmer in the distance, but he was too focused on his plowing to notice her. A dog barked from a distant cottage, but no one came out to investigate. By the time she reached the outskirts of the village, her legs were trembling from exertion and her dress was mud-splattered to the knees. The church bell was tolling 7, half an hour until the coach departed. The coaching inn was bustling with early morning activity, ostlers tending horses, travelers collecting luggage, a merchant arguing with the innkeeper about overnight charges. Elena kept her head down and approached the booking office. "Ticket to London, please." The clerk barely glanced at her. "That'll be 12 shillings, miss. Coach leaves in 20 minutes. She counted out the coins with shaking fingers, accepted the ticket, and retreated to a shadowed corner of the yard to wait. Around her, life continued. A woman scolding a child, 2 men discussing crop prices, an elderly couple sharing bread and cheese. Normal life. The kind of life that didn't include conspiracies and forced institutionalization and wedding gowns that felt like shrouds. The coach, when it finally rumbled into the yard, was a battered old thing, its green paint chipped and faded. But it represented escape, and that made it beautiful. "London coach, all aboard for London. Stops at Millbrook, Ashford, and..." Elena climbed inside and found a seat in the far corner. There were 3 other passengers already settled, a tired-looking clerk, an older woman with a basket of knitting, and a merchant who immediately fell asleep against the window. The door closed. The coach lurched into motion. She'd made it. Elena closed her eyes and allowed herself one shuddering breath. Then another. The tension that had been coiling tighter and tighter in her chest since last night finally began to ease. She'd escaped Hartmore, escaped her uncle, escaped Barrington and his nightmare plans. But even as relief flooded through her, reality settled in its place. She was alone. She had £60 and a strand of pearls to her name. She had no family, no connections, nowhere to go. She was a 23-year-old unmarried woman with no chaperone, no references, and no prospects. Her uncle would be searching for her already. By now he'd have discovered her empty room, would have questioned Iris, would have sent riders out in every direction. Under English law, she was still his ward. He had every right to retrieve her, by force if necessary. And when he found her, and he would find her eventually, she'd be dragged back to Hartmore and delivered to Barrington like a package that had been temporarily misplaced, unless she found a way to make herself unreachable. The coach rattled along, carrying her farther from everything she'd ever known. Elena stared out the window at the passing countryside, her mind racing. She needed protection. She needed someone with enough power and authority that even her uncle couldn't touch her. But who? She had no influential friends, no wealthy relatives who might intervene. Even if she could prove the conspiracy, and she had no proof, just words overheard through a cracked door, it would be her word against Lord Barrington's and her legal guardians. The courts would side with them. Society would side with them. A runaway ward, they'd say. A hysterical girl with wild accusations, clearly unstable. Perhaps institutionalization is for the best after all. The coach jolted over a rough patch of road, jarring Elena from her spiraling thoughts. Across from her, the knitting woman looked up and offered a sympathetic smile. "Rough journey, dear." Elena managed a weak nod. "They'll smooth it out once we're on the main pike," the woman continued, her needles clicking steadily. "First time to London?" "Yes." "Visiting family?" Taking up a position. The lie came easily now. "As a companion." "Ah, good for you. Steady work that. I hope your employer is kind." "So do I." The woman returned to her knitting, the conversation apparently concluded. Elena turned back to the window, but her reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale, drawn, frightened. She looked like what she was, a woman running out of time. The coach rumbled on through the morning, stopping briefly at Millbrook to take on 2 more passengers and change horses. Elena stayed in her seat, bonnet pulled low, while the others stretched their legs and purchased refreshments from the inn. She couldn't risk being seen, Couldn't risk someone recognizing her and reporting back to... The thought died as the coach door opened and a man entered. Not one of the expected passengers, someone else entirely. He was tall, dressed in black from head to toe. Black greatcoat, black gloves, black boots polished to a mirror shine. His hair was dark as coal, and his face held the kind of sharp, aristocratic features that belonged on ancient coins or family portraits. But it was his eyes that caught Elena's attention and held it. Gray as storm clouds, cold as winter ice, and fixed directly on the empty seat beside her. "Is this space taken?" His voice was deep, cultured, with the kind of effortless authority that expected compliance. "No, sir," Elena whispered. He settled into the seat with economical grace, folded his hands on the silver head of his walking stick, and said nothing further. Elena tried to make herself smaller, shrinking into the corner, but she could feel his presence like heat from a fire. Who was he? Not a common traveler, that much was obvious. His clothes alone probably cost more than everything Elena owned. The walking stick was no affectation. She could see the tension in his right leg, a slight stiffness as he'd climbed aboard. An injury? An old wound? None of your concern, she told herself firmly. Keep your head down. Speak to no one. Attract no attention. But as the coach lurched back into motion and the miles rolled by, Elena became increasingly aware that the man beside her had turned his attention toward her. Not obviously, he wasn't staring, but she could feel the weight of his observation, the way someone with experience might assess a painting or a horse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You're running from something." Elena's head snapped up, her heart launching into her throat. I beg your pardon?" "It's not a question." He hadn't moved, hadn't changed his relaxed posture, but those gray eyes were sharp with intelligence. "You keep looking out the window as though expecting pursuit. You flinch every time we slow down. Your bag is packed hastily. I can see a sleeve hanging from the clasp. And unless I'm very mistaken, that's mud from a plowed field on your boots, not from any road." She should have denied it, should have laughed it off as nonsense, should have done anything except what she did do. She met his eyes and said, "If I am, it's none of your business." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. "Fair enough. I withdraw my impertinent observation." He returned his attention to the passing landscape, and Elena tried to slow her racing pulse. Who was this man, and why had he noticed details that everyone else had overlooked? Dangerous. This man was dangerous. But as the morning wore into afternoon and the coach continued its journey toward London, something odd happened. The man beside her asked no more questions, made no further comments. He simply sat in comfortable silence, occasionally shifting his injured leg to a new position, but otherwise as still as stone. Elena found herself relaxing by degrees. Perhaps his observation had been exactly what he'd claimed, an impertinent comment, nothing more. Perhaps he had no interest in runaway wards or conspiracies, or... The coach lurched violently and shuddered to a sudden stop. Outside, horses screamed, men shouted, the other passengers tumbled forward in their seats, and Elena braced herself against the wall. What on earth? The merchant was struggling to right himself. The door flew open. A man stood there, wild-eyed and breathing hard. Not a coachman, not anyone who should have been stopping the coach. "Everyone out, now! Hands where I can see them!" A highwayman. They were being robbed. The other passengers scrambled to comply, fear overriding any thoughts of resistance. Elena moved to follow, but a hand closed on her wrist, holding her back. The dark-haired man. His expression hadn't changed, but his grip was iron. "Stay in the coach," he said quietly. But he said, I know what he said, "Stay in the coach." Then he released her, stepped out into the road, and everything went sideways. Elena never saw exactly what happened. There was a blur of motion, a cry of pain, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. When she finally dared to look out, the highwayman was on his back in the dirt, unconscious, and the dark-haired man was calmly dusting off his gloves. The coachman and the other passengers stood frozen in shock. "I believe," the dark-haired man said mildly, "we should continue our journey before this gentleman's companions arrive. If he has companions." The coachman needed no further encouragement. Within minutes, they were moving again. leaving the unconscious highwayman behind in the road. Elena stared at her mysterious traveling companion as he settled back into his seat as though nothing unusual had occurred. "Who are you?" For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Someone you don't need to fear, and someone who has a rather keen eye for people in trouble." He paused. "The name is Blackthorne. Adrian Blackthorne." The name meant nothing to Elena. Should it have? "I don't suppose," he continued, his tone conversational, "that you'd care to tell me what or whom you're running from." Every instinct screamed at Elena to stay silent, to lie, to protect herself. But something in those storm-gray eyes made her reconsider. This man had just disabled a highwayman without breaking a sweat. He'd noticed details about her that no one else had seen, and there was something in the way he'd said, "someone you don't need to fear," that suggested he understood exactly what fear felt like. "My guardian," she heard herself say, "and the man he's trying to force me to marry." Adrian Blackthorne nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I see. And does this guardian have a name?" "Frederick Whitford." "And the intended husband?" Elena's throat went dry. "Lord Barrington." The temperature in the coach seemed to drop 10 degrees. Blackthorne's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes, something that made the highwayman outside look like a child's game. "Marcus Barrington," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You know him?" "I know of him." The words were clipped, precise. "I know that 3 women married him and 3 women disappeared into private asylums. I know that the courts have been curiously reluctant to investigate these disappearances, despite compelling evidence of foul play. And I know—" He stopped himself, jaw tight. "You know what?" Blackthorne was silent for a long moment, then, "I know that the last woman he married was a friend of my sister's, Emily Hartford, 22 years old, kind, intelligent, in perfect health. 6 months after the wedding, she was declared insane and locked away. She died in that asylum 11 months later. The official cause was brain fever. My sister never quite recovered from the loss." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He looked at her with renewed intensity. "So your guardian was planning to deliver you to Barrington, and you overheard this?" "Last night. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. The price he's paying for my hand. The timeline for having me declared unstable. All of it." "Do you have proof?" "Only my word. Which counts for nothing against a guardian and a lord, especially if you're a woman running from a marriage." He said it bluntly, but not unkindly. "They'll paint you as hysterical. They'll say you've manufactured this story to avoid your duty, and the law will side with them." "I know." The words tasted like ash. "I know there's nothing I can do. That's why I'm running. It's all I have left." The coach rattled on through the afternoon. Outside, the landscape was changing. More buildings now, more roads intersecting, signs of civilization growing denser. They were getting close to London. And then what? Elena still had no answer to that question. No plan beyond reaching the city and hoping somehow to disappear into its sprawling crowds. "There is one option," Blackthorne said suddenly. Elena looked at him. "What?" "An option that would put you entirely beyond your guardian's reach, permanently, legally." "I don't understand." His gray eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "Marriage, not to Barrington, to someone else. Someone your uncle can't control and Barrington can't touch. Once you're wed, your guardian's authority ends. Everything transfers to your husband. Your uncle would have no legal claim, no matter how hard he tried." Elena stared at him. "But I don't know anyone who would—" She stopped. Realization dawned slowly, then all at once. "You're not suggesting—" "I am. That's insane. We've only just met. You know nothing about me. I know nothing about you except your name and the fact that you can knock out highwaymen. I know you're brave enough to run when running was your only choice. I know you're clever enough to evade detection until now. I know you'd rather face an uncertain future alone than marry a monster." He paused. "And I know that Marcus Barrington has escaped justice for too long. If saving you is the way to ensure he never claims another victim, then I'm prepared to do exactly that." Why would you help me? We're complete strangers. Perhaps. Or perhaps we're two people who both want the same thing, to see Barrington brought to account for what he's done. His expression softened, just slightly. I couldn't save Emily Hartford, but I can save you, if you'll let me. The coach was slowing. Through the window, Elena could see the outskirts of London, buildings crowding closer together, streets thick with traffic and people. They'd be at the coaching inn within minutes. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Blackthorne leaned forward slightly. Listen to me carefully, Miss Whitford. You have 3 options. 1, you disappear into London and hope your uncle never finds you, which is unlikely. 2, you attempt to flee the country, which requires money and documents you don't have. Or 3, you accept my offer and become a person your uncle in Barrington cannot legally touch. A marriage of convenience. Precisely. And what would you want in return? His smile was thin. The satisfaction of destroying Marcus Barrington's plans. And if, in the process, we can gather enough evidence to see him prosecuted for what he did to his previous wives, all the better. The coach jerked to a halt. Outside, the sounds of London washed over them. Vendors calling, horses clopping on cobblestones, 100 conversations blending into white noise. The door opened. The coachman peered in. London, miss. Sir. End of the line. Blackthorne stood, wincing slightly as his injured leg took his weight. He turned to Elena and extended his hand. So, what will it be, Miss Whitford? Will you trust a stranger, or will you take your chances alone in a city that shows no mercy to women without protection? Elena looked at that outstretched hand, looked at those storm-gray eyes that had seen through her disguise from the first moment, looked at the man who claimed to want justice for women she'd never met. She thought of Iris's words. You were born to be free. True freedom, she realized, wasn't just about escaping Barrington. It was about having the power to fight back, to turn the tables, to transform from hunted victim into something else entirely. She placed her hand in Adrian Blackthorne's. I accept your offer. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, strong. Then welcome to the game, Miss Whitford. Let's go ruin some lives. Adrian Blackthorne's London townhouse stood on a quiet street in Mayfair, all clean Georgian lines and shuttered windows that revealed nothing of what lay inside. Elena climbed down from the hired carriage. Blackthorne had insisted they not use his own vehicle, not yet, nothing that would draw attention, and stared up at the imposing facade. Having second thoughts? Blackthorne asked, paying the driver. Third and fourth thoughts, Elena admitted. But I'm still here. Good. He gestured toward the door. After you. A butler answered before they'd even reached the top step, his face carefully neutral as he took in Elena's mud-splattered dress and hastily packed bag. If he was surprised by his employer's unexpected arrival with an unknown woman, he gave no sign. Mr. Blackthorne, we weren't expecting you back from the country until... Plans changed, Graves. This is Miss Whitford. She'll be staying with us. Please have the blue guest room prepared immediately and send for Mrs. Winters. Of course, sir. Graves stepped aside to let them enter. Will you be requiring dinner? Yes. And Graves' absolute discretion. No one is to know Miss Whitford is here. No one. The butler's expression didn't flicker. Understood, sir. The entrance hall was elegant but austere. Black and white marble floors, dark wood paneling, a single enormous painting of a wind-swept coastline that dominated one wall. Everything was immaculate, expensive, and somehow cold, like a house that had forgotten how to be a home. Elena followed Blackthorne down a corridor and into a library that smelled of leather and tobacco. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, packed with volumes that looked actually read rather than merely decorative. A fire burned in the grate despite the mild spring evening. Sit. Blackthorne gestured to a chair near the fire. You look exhausted. She was. Now that the adrenaline of escape had finally drained away, Elena felt hollowed out, trembling with fatigue she hadn't let herself acknowledge. She sank into the chair gratefully. Blackthorne poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter, pressed one into her hands. Drink. It will help. The brandy burned going down, but warmth spread through her chest. What happens now? Now we make you disappear. He settled into the chair opposite hers, his injured leg stretched out toward the fire. Your uncle will have discovered your absence by now. He'll have sent men to search the roads, the coaching inns, anywhere you might have gone. But London swallows people whole if they want to vanish. You'll be safe here while we arrange the marriage. How quickly can it be done? With a special license? 3 days? Perhaps 4? I have connections at the Archbishop's office. He swirled the brandy in his glass, watching the firelight play through the amber liquid. But first, I need to know everything. The truth this time, all of it. Your full name, your family, your inheritance, everything your uncle and Barrington are after. Elena took another sip for courage. My name is Elena Margaret Whitford. My father was Thomas Whitford, third son of the Earl of Pemberton. My mother was Margaret Bellamy, daughter of a wealthy merchant. They married for love, which scandalized both families. My father was disinherited. My mother's family disowned her. They didn't care. They built their own life, made their own fortune through father's investments in shipping and trade. And when they died? A fever took them both when I was 17. It happened so quickly. 1 week they were well, the next they were gone. The familiar ache settled in her chest. Father's will named his brother Frederick as my guardian until I reached 25 or married. I inherited everything else. The townhouse, the properties, the investments. Nearly £200,000. Blackthorn's eyes sharpened. 200,000. No wonder Barrington is interested. Uncle Frederick has been stealing from my inheritance for years. Small amounts at first, carefully hidden. But his gambling debts kept growing, and he got desperate. He started mortgaging the properties, selling off investments. By the time I discovered what he was doing, he'd already squandered nearly £40,000. You confronted him? I threatened to petition the courts to remove him as trustee. That was 6 months ago. Elena stared into her glass. A week later, he introduced me to Lord Barrington, told me what an advantageous match it would be, how fortunate I was that such a wealthy, titled gentleman had taken an interest. I refused at first, but Uncle Frederick was persuasive. Meaning? Meaning he locked me in my room for 3 days with no food until I agreed to consider Barrington's suit. Meaning he dismissed any servant who showed me sympathy. Meaning he made it very clear that my choices were to marry Barrington willingly or be declared mentally incompetent and married off anyway. Her hands tightened on the glass. So I played along. I pretended to be the obedient ward. I attended dinners with Barrington, accepted his courtship, acted like I was falling under his spell, all while trying desperately to find a way out. And then you overheard the truth. Yes, the memory still made her sick. They were laughing about it, like it was all just a game, a business transaction. Uncle Frederick actually said he was relieved to be rid of me, that I'd been nothing but trouble since I was old enough to question his decisions. Blackthorn was quiet for a long moment. And if we marry, what becomes of this fortune? It transfers to you. Under English law, everything I own becomes yours the moment we wed. You would have complete control. I see. His expression was unreadable. And you're willing to trust me with that? Elena met his eyes. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. Then I choose to believe that a man who couldn't save his sister's friend might be motivated by something other than greed. She paused. Am I wrong? No. The word was quiet but firm. I don't need your money, Miss Whitford. I have more than enough of my own. What I need is leverage against Barrington, and you've just handed it to me. Before Elena could ask what he meant, a soft knock interrupted them. A woman entered, middle-aged, severe-looking, dressed in the black and white of a housekeeper. Mrs. Winters, Blackthorn said, rising, thank you for coming so quickly. This is Miss Whitford. She'll be our guest for the next few days. She'll need everything, clothes, toiletries, whatever she requires. Can you see to it? Of course, Your Grace. The housekeeper's voice was brisk but not unkind. Miss, if you'll follow me. Your Grace. The title hit Elena like cold water. She stared at Blackthorn. You're a duke? Did I not mention that? He looked faintly amused. Adrian Blackthorn, Duke of Ravencrest. My apologies for the oversight. You let me think. I assumed you were just someone with enough influence to help? I am. The title simply makes it official. He gestured toward Mrs. Winters. Go, rest. We'll talk more in the morning. Elena followed the housekeeper up a grand staircase and down another corridor to a bedroom decorated in shades of blue and cream. It was elegant, spacious, and far too luxurious for someone who'd spent the morning fleeing through muddy fields. There's a bath being drawn, Mrs. Winters said, opening an adjoining door to reveal a dressing room and bathroom. I've sent for a dressmaker and a lady's maid who can be trusted to be discreet. In the meantime, I've laid out a nightgown and robe. Will you need anything else? No? Thank you. This is more than enough. The housekeeper paused at the door. His Grace is a good man, Miss Whitford. Whatever trouble you're in, you're safe here. Then she was gone, and Elena was alone in a duke's townhouse, preparing to marry a man she'd met 6 hours ago to escape a conspiracy that still felt like a nightmare she might wake from. Except she wouldn't wake from this. This was real. All of it. She sank into the bath and let the hot water ease muscles she hadn't realized were clenched. Tomorrow she would face whatever came next. Tonight, she would simply exist, safe and warm and free, for one more precious night. The morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Elena woke to find a breakfast tray waiting and 3-day dresses laid out on the bed, simple but well made, in her size. Mrs. Winters had clearly worked miracles overnight. She dressed in a dove-gray gown and made her way downstairs, following the sound of voices to a morning room flooded with sunlight. Blackthorn, no, she had to think of him as Ravencrest now, had to remember what he was, sat at a table covered in newspapers and correspondence. A younger woman occupied the chair opposite him, dark-haired and elegant, gesturing emphatically as she spoke. Absolutely cannot simply announce that you've married some unknown woman without explanation. Society will... She broke off as Elena entered. Oh. Elena, this is my sister, Lady Catherine Ashford. Catherine, Miss Elena Whitford. Catherine's eyes widened. Whitford? Frederick Whitford's ward? You know him? Elena's stomach dropped. Everyone knows him. Terrible gambler, deep in debt, keeps trying to marry you off to... Understanding dawned across Catherine's face. Oh. Oh, no. Don't tell me he was trying to match you with Marcus Barrington. He succeeded, or he would have, if I hadn't run. But, Catherine turned to her brother. Adrian, tell me you haven't done something reckless. I've offered Miss Whitford my protection in the form of marriage. I'd hardly call that reckless. You've known her less than a day. I've known of Barrington for years. This isn't impulse, Catherine, it's strategy. The siblings stared at each other across the table, some silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Catherine sighed and turned back to Elena. Do you have any idea what you're getting into? My brother is the Duke of Ravencrest. He controls estates across 3 counties, sits in the House of Lords, and has enemies in every level of society who would love to see him brought down. If you marry him, you become a target. I'm already a target, Elena said quietly. At least this way I can fight back. Something shifted in Catherine's expression. You remind me of someone. Emily Hartford. She was my dearest friend, and Barrington... Her voice cracked. He destroyed her. Locked her away until there was nothing left. I know. Your brother told me. Then you understand why I'm asking. Are you prepared for what comes next? Because once Frederick and Barrington realize what you've done, they won't simply walk away. They'll attack. They'll drag your name through every drawing room in London. They'll claim you seduced Adrian, that you're a fortune hunter, that you're unstable. They'll make your life hell. They were already planning to lock me in an asylum and steal everything I own. How much worse can it get? Catherine laughed, but there was no humor in it. You'd be surprised. She glanced at her brother. You're really doing this? I am. Then we need a story. A good one. Something that will make this marriage seem inevitable rather than suspicious. Such as? Catherine tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. A secret courtship. You've been writing to each other for months, ever since you met at... Where? Some neutral location where Adrian might reasonably have encountered Frederick's ward. The Hartwell Ball, Blackthorn, Ravencrest, said suddenly. Last autumn. Frederick dragged Elena to it, and I was there representing family interests. We could have met then. Perfect. A chance encounter followed by secret correspondence because you knew Frederick would never approve of the match. Adrian isn't titled enough. Wait, that won't work. He's a duke. He's also notorious for being reclusive and difficult, Ravencrest offered. Frederick could reasonably have objected to the match based on my reputation alone. True. Half of London thinks you're a hermit, and the other half thinks you're dangerous. Catherine warmed to the story. So, secret courtship, growing attachment, and when Frederick announced Elena's engagement to Barrington, you both panicked and eloped. It needs to be believable, Elena said. Uncle Frederick will question every detail. Then we make it airtight. Catherine stood and began pacing. Witnesses. We need people who will swear they saw you together at the Hartwell ball, that they noticed the attraction. I can manage that. A few carefully placed words to the right gossips. Then we need evidence of the correspondence. Love letters. I'm not writing fake love letters, Ravencrest said flatly. You don't have to write them now. Just date them correctly and produce them if challenged. A few passionate declarations, some carefully vague references to meetings, Catherine, and seal them with your family crest. Frederick can't prove they weren't written months ago. Elena's head was spinning. This is absurd. We're manufacturing an entire fictional courtship. Welcome to high society, Catherine said dryly. Everything is performance. The trick is making your performance more convincing than theirs. She turned back to her brother. When's the wedding? 3 days. I'm securing the special license this afternoon. Too fast. Even an elopement needs some preparation. Give me 5 days. I'll need time to plant the right rumors to make sure our story is circulating before Frederick can spread his version. 5 days means 5 more days Elena is vulnerable to discovery. She's in your house, under your protection. Frederick may suspect she fled to London, but he can't search every building in the city. And even if he somehow traces her here, you're a duke. He can't simply storm in and drag her out. Can't he? Elena asked. He's my legal guardian. The law is on his side. The law is complicated. Catherine sat back down, her expression serious. Yes, Frederick has legal authority over you as your guardian, but Adrian has authority as a duke and a peer of the realm. If it came to a direct confrontation, Frederick would need a court order to remove you from this house, and getting that court order requires time. Time we'll use to make you unreachable through marriage. It made sense. Terrifying, complicated, potentially disastrous sense. But sense nonetheless. 5 days then, Ravencrest agreed. But Elena stays here, out of sight. No one can know she's in London. Agreed. Catherine stood. I need to go spread some gossip. Elena, dear, I hope you're prepared for what comes next. Because once we start this, there's no turning back. After Catherine left, Elena found herself alone with Ravencrest again. He'd returned to his correspondence, reading and discarding letters with swift efficiency. She watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile the man who'd casually disabled a highwayman with the Duke, who sat handling business matters as though nothing unusual was happening. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm trying to understand why you're doing this. I told you, Barrington needs to be stopped. There are other ways to stop him that don't involve marrying a stranger. Now he did look up, his gray eyes measuring. Are there? The courts have ignored his crimes for years. Society enables him because he's charming and wealthy and titled. The system protects men like Barrington, so we use that same system against him. By marrying me. By marrying you. He set down the letter he'd been reading. Here's what happens next. Once we're wed, your fortune transfers to me. That means Frederick loses his access to your money. Barrington loses his prize. They both lose the ability to control you legally. But more than that, once you're my Duchess, you have a platform. We can investigate Barrington openly, question his previous marriages, demand answers about what happened to his wives. As Elena Whitford, runaway ward, you have no voice. As the Duchess of Ravencrest, you have power. And if Barrington fights back, let him try. Something dangerous flickered in Ravencrest's expression. I've been looking for an excuse to destroy Marcus Barrington for 3 years. You've just given me one. The word should have frightened her. Instead, Elena felt something fierce and savage stir in her chest. Justice. Finally, after years of being powerless, after months of watching her uncle steal and scheme and lie, after a night spent fleeing through darkness, finally, she had a weapon. "What do you need me to do?" Ravencrest smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. "Learn to be a duchess." The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Catherine returned each morning with reports of rumors successfully planted and society gossip carefully manipulated. Apparently half of London now believed the Duke of Ravencrest had been conducting a secret romance for months, and the other half thought it was wildly romantic. Meanwhile, Elena was subjected to a whirlwind education in aristocratic behavior, deportment, conversation, the intricate rules of precedence and protocol, how to address a countess versus a viscountess, which topics were acceptable in polite company and which were scandalous, the proper way to enter a room, to take tea, to manage servants. "You're doing well," Catherine said on the third day, watching Elena navigate a practice conversation about nothing at all. "Better than well, actually. You have natural grace." "I had an excellent governess," Elena said, thinking of Iris, wondering if the old woman was all right, if her uncle had punished her for helping with the escape. Still, there's a difference between being well educated and knowing how to survive in the shark tank of high society. You'll need to be on guard every moment. One slip, one wrong word, and they'll tear you apart. They're going to tear me apart anyway. At least this way I'll know the rules they're breaking. Catherine laughed. "You really do remind me of Emily. She said something similar once." The laughter faded. She thought knowing the rules would protect her. It didn't. Barrington knew them better. Then I'll have to learn them better than him. On the fourth day, Ravencrest returned from securing the special license and called Elena into the library. He looked tired, she thought. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "It's done," he said. "We can be married tomorrow morning at the private chapel here. Graves and Mrs. Winters will serve as witnesses." Tomorrow. The word hit like a thunderclap. Tomorrow she would be married. Tomorrow she would become the Duchess of Ravencrest. Tomorrow her life would change irrevocably. "Are you sure?" she heard herself ask. "This is your last chance to reconsider." "I could say the same to you." "I asked first." He crossed to the window, staring out at the street below. "My father was a terrible duke. Cruel, vindictive, more concerned with his own pleasures than the people who depended on him. When he died, I inherited a duchy in chaos, estates mismanaged, tenants suffering, debts everywhere. I've spent the last 10 years trying to undo the damage he did. I don't understand what this has to do with. It has everything to do with it." He turned back to face her. "My father enabled men like Barrington, protected them, befriended them, helped them hide their crimes because they were useful to him. I swore when I took the title that I would be different, that I would use my power to help rather than harm. So yes, I'm sure, because this is exactly the kind of thing I should be doing with the authority I've been given." Elena studied his face, looking for signs of doubt or deception. She found neither, just a bone-deep determination that matched her own. "Then I suppose we're both sure." "I suppose we are." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of tomorrow. Finally, Ravencrest moved to his desk and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's." He opened it to reveal a ring, simple gold band set with a square-cut sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "It's traditional for the Duchess to wear it. If you'd prefer something else..." "It's beautiful." Elena took the box, studying the ring in the lamplight. The sapphire was deep blue, almost black in certain angles. "Your mother had excellent taste." "She did. She also had the good sense to die before she saw what my father became." He said it matter-of-factly, but there was old pain underneath. "She would have liked you, I think. She appreciated courage." Elena slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her. "I'll try to honor it. Just survive it. That will be honor enough." That night Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the blue guest room, her last night as Elena Whitford, unmarried ward, and stared at the ceiling, thoughts churning. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew. Tomorrow she would become a duchess, with all the power and danger that implied. Tomorrow, the fight would truly begin. But she wasn't afraid, not anymore. Fear was what she'd felt hiding under the seat of that carriage. Fear was what had driven her flight from Hartmoor. This feeling now was something else entirely. This was readiness. The ceremony itself was brief, almost brutally simple. No flowers, no music, no guests beyond the required witnesses. Just Elena in a borrowed blue dress, Ravencrest in formal black, and a priest who asked no questions and seemed eager to finish quickly. Do you, Adrian James Blackthorne, Duke of Ravencrest, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Elena Margaret Whitford, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Elena looked at Ravencrest. His gray eyes met hers, steady and sure. She thought of her uncle's cruel laugh, of Barrington's cold smile, of 3 women locked away and forgotten. I do. The ring slid onto her finger beside the sapphire. The priest pronounced them married. Ravencrest kissed her briefly, formally, his lips cool and impersonal against hers. It was done. She was the Duchess of Ravencrest. And then, before the ink was even dry on the marriage certificate, everything went to hell. Graves appeared in the chapel doorway, his usual composure shattered. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but there are men outside demanding entrance. They say they represent Frederick Whitford, and they have a warrant for the Duchess's return. Ravencrest's expression went very still. How many men? 6, and a magistrate. They can't do this, Elena said, ice flooding her veins. We're married. The ceremony is complete. I'm not his ward anymore. The marriage has to be registered, Ravencrest said quietly. Until the documents are filed with the church registry and the courts, technically, it's not legally binding, and that process takes days. He'd found them. Somehow, impossible as it seemed, her uncle had tracked her to London, to this house, and arrived with perfect timing to snatch her back before the marriage could be formalized. There's a back entrance, Graves said urgently. If we move now— No! Ravencrest's voice cut through the panic like a blade. We don't run. Not from this. He turned to Elena. Do you trust me? I don't know. Fair enough. Do you trust me more than you trust them? Yes. Then follow my lead. He strode toward the front of the house, Elena hurrying to keep pace. Catherine emerged from the drawing room, her face pale. Adrian, you can't seriously mean to— Get the marriage certificate. Bring it to the entrance hall, quickly. The front doors stood open, revealing a group of men on the steps. Elena recognized her uncle immediately, Frederick Whitford, looking furious and triumphant in equal measure. Beside him stood a thin man in magistrate's robes, holding official-looking documents. And behind them, watching with cold satisfaction, was Lord Barrington himself. There she is, Frederick pointed at Elena. That's my ward. The girl who ran away from her legal guardians and must be returned immediately. Your Grace, the magistrate said, addressing Ravencrest with barely concealed contempt. I have here a warrant for the return of Miss Elena Whitford to her guardian's custody. She is a runaway ward, and you are harboring her illegally. I'm harboring my wife, Ravencrest said calmly. The Duchess of Ravencrest. We were married not 20 minutes ago in my private chapel. The magistrate's eyes narrowed. I'll need to see proof of that marriage. Catherine, Ravencrest's sister appeared with the certificate, still damp with fresh ink. The magistrate examined it, his frown deepening. This is dated today, obviously. And Miss Whitford, the Duchess of Ravencrest, Ravencrest corrected, his voice dropping to something dangerous, was under her guardian's legal authority until the moment of marriage. Mr. Whitford, did you consent to this union? Absolutely not, Frederick sputtered. This is kidnapping, seduction. She's a child who's been manipulated by— I'm 23 years old, Elena said, finding her voice, and I'm married of my own free will. You fled your legal guardian, Barrington spoke for the first time, his cultured tones reasonable, almost kind. You disappeared without a word, causing enormous distress. Forgive me, Your Grace, but this does rather suggest a young woman not in full possession of her faculties. My faculties are perfectly sound. Then why run? Barrington's smile was gentle, sympathetic. Why flee like a criminal unless you were suffering some form of episode, some break with reality? And there it was. The trap, sprung early. They were already planting the seeds, hysterical female, unbalanced mind, clearly not capable of making rational decisions. I ran, Elena said clearly, because I overheard my uncle and Lord Barrington plotting to have me declared insane and institutionalized so they could steal my inheritance. Silence crashed through the entrance hall. Frederick went purple. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? The truth that you've been embezzling from my trust for years? The truth that you sold me to Barrington for £30,000 in forgiveness of your gambling debts? You see, Barrington said to the magistrate, shaking his head sadly, these delusions, these paranoid accusations, exactly the kind of fantasies that suggest mental instability. They're not fantasies, Ravencrest said, and we can prove it. He gestured, and Graves appeared with a leather portfolio. Ravencrest opened it to reveal stacks of documents, bank statements, property records, loan agreements. This is a complete accounting of Frederick Whitford's management of his ward's estate. You'll find evidence of systematic embezzlement, fraudulent sales, and undisclosed debts totaling nearly £40,000. I've had my investigators reviewing the records for the past 3 days. He'd been investigating. While Elena learned to curtsy and make small talk, while Catherine planted rumors, Ravencrest had been quietly building a case. The magistrate took the portfolio with obvious reluctance, flipping through pages. His frown deepened. These appear to be, This suggests serious financial impropriety. It suggests theft, Ravencrest corrected, and conspiracy. We have evidence that Mr. Whitford and Lord Barrington collaborated on a scheme to defraud Miss Whitford, now the Duchess of Ravencrest, of her entire inheritance. We also have questions about Lord Barrington's 3 previous marriages and the convenient declarations of insanity that followed each one. Barrington's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold beneath. Careful, Your Grace. Slander is a serious accusation. So is murder. The word hung in the air like smoke. My sister's friend Emily Hartford was your 3rd wife, Ravencrest continued. She died in an asylum 11 months after you had her committed. I have letters from the staff suggesting her death was neither natural nor expected. I've also located your 2nd wife, still alive, barely, locked in a facility in Yorkshire. She's quite willing to tell her story to anyone who will listen. Barrington's face had gone white. You're bluffing. Am I? Ravencrest smiled, and it was terrifying. Shall we test that theory in court? The magistrate looked between them, clearly out of his depth. This has become far more complicated than a simple matter of a runaway ward. There is no runaway ward, Ravencrest said. There is my wife, the Duchess of Ravencrest, and there are 2 men who attempted to defraud her. Now remove them from my property before I have them arrested for trespassing. You can't do this, Frederick hissed. I'm her guardian. I have rights. You have debts, and a serious problem with the law if we pursue these fraud charges. Ravencrest's voice could have cut glass. I suggest you leave London, today, and pray we don't decide to press this matter further. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Barrington placed a hand on Frederick's arm. Come, we're clearly not welcome here. His cold gaze swept over Elena. This isn't over, my dear. Marriage doesn't make you untouchable. It just makes you a different kind of target. Then I suppose we'll see who has better aim, Elena said. Barrington's smile was deadly. Indeed we will. They left, Frederick still sputtering protests, the magistrate following with the portfolio of evidence clutched in uncertain hands. The door closed behind them with a finality that should have felt like victory. It felt like the beginning of a war. Ravencrest closed the door and turned to find Elena swaying on her feet, her face drained of color. He caught her elbow, steadying her. Breathe. I just accused a lord of conspiracy and murder in front of a magistrate. Her voice came out thin, reedy. What have I done? You fired the first shot. He guided her toward the drawing room, away from the servants who were pretending not to stare. Now we finish the war. Catherine appeared with brandy, pressing a glass into Elena's trembling hands. That was either the bravest or the most reckless thing I've ever witnessed. I haven't decided which. Both, Ravencrest said. It was both. Elena drank, the burn of alcohol grounding her back and her body. Barrington's threat. He said marriage doesn't make me untouchable. He's right, it doesn't. Ravencrest's expression was grim. But it does change the battlefield. As my wife, you have legal protections your uncle can't override. But Barrington is a different problem entirely. He has money, influence, and no scruples about using either. So what do? We make you visible. Catherine set down her own glass with decisive force. Right now, you're a rumor, a scandal, a mysterious woman who allegedly trapped a duke into marriage. We need to change that narrative. We need London to see you, know you, and most importantly, believe you. How? A ball. Catherine's eyes gleamed with strategic intensity. A proper introduction to society as the Duchess of Ravencrest. We invite everyone who matters, every titled family, every influential voice. We make it impossible for Barrington to paint you as some unstable girl who seduced her way into a title. We show them a duchess. I don't know how to be a duchess. Then you'll learn quickly. Catherine stood, already planning. We have 2 weeks. That's enough time to prepare, to make sure the right people are primed with the right stories. Adrian, you'll need to be seen with her publicly before the ball. Drives through Hyde Park, the opera, dinners with influential allies. Make it clear this isn't a marriage of shame or desperation. It is a marriage of desperation, Elena pointed out. They don't need to know that. Catherine smiled, sharp and satisfied. They need to see a love match, or at least a strategic alliance so advantageous that no one questions it. Ravencrest nodded slowly. The Westmere dinner is in 3 days. I can secure an invitation. Perfect. Lord Westmere sits on half the committees in Parliament. If he accepts Elena, others will follow. Catherine turned to Elena. Can you manage 3 days? Can you learn enough to hold your own in that environment? Elena thought of her uncle's rage, of Barrington's cold threat, of 3 women locked away and silenced. I'll manage. Good. Catherine's expression softened slightly. I know this is terrifying, but you're not alone. We're with you. The word should have been comforting. Instead, they highlighted how utterly dependent Elena had become on strangers who'd known her less than a week. Her survival, her freedom, her very identity now rested in the hands of a reclusive duke and his fiercely protective sister. She'd never felt more vulnerable in her life. The next 3 days were brutal. Catherine drilled Elena relentlessly on every aspect of aristocratic behavior, how to enter a room with the proper degree of confidence but not arrogance, how to navigate conversations with people who would be looking for any sign of weakness, how to deflect invasive questions without appearing evasive. They practiced curtsies until Elena's legs ached, rehearsed responses to probable insults until she could deliver cutting rejoinders without hesitation. Lady Pemberton will definitely comment on your sudden marriage, Catherine said, playing the role of society matron with vicious accuracy. She'll say something like, "How extraordinary that we'd never heard of you before, my dear. Where exactly did you say your family was from?" My father was Thomas Whitford, 3rd son of the Earl of Pemberton, Elena recited. My mother was Margaret Bellamy of the Derbyshire Bellamys. Our family preferred privacy to society, which is why I wasn't presented before my parents' deaths. And when she asks why you were living with Frederick Whitford instead of your titled relatives, my father was estranged from his family due to my parents' love match. After their deaths, Uncle Frederick was appointed my guardian by the courts. It was not an arrangement I chose. Good. Keep your answers brief but complete. Never volunteer more information than required. Catherine circled her like a general inspecting troops. Mrs. Fairfax will ask about the courtship. She's a romantic, so you can be slightly more effusive there. We met at the Hartwell Ball last autumn. Adrian was kind when others were merely polite. We began corresponding in secret, knowing my uncle would disapprove of the attachment. When Uncle Frederick announced my engagement to Lord Barrington against my wishes, Adrian and I eloped rather than be separated. Better. But soften your expression when you mention my brother. You're supposed to be in love, remember? Elena tried for a softer look, but Catherine shook her head. You look constipated. Think of something that makes you genuinely feel warmth. She thought of Iris helping her escape, of the governess who'd risked everything to give Elena a chance at freedom. The memory brought a real smile, gentle and true. There. That's the expression. Hold on to that feeling and aim it at Adrian whenever anyone's watching. Meanwhile, Ravencrest worked on the legal front. His investigators uncovered more damning evidence against Frederick. Forged documents, falsified accounts, loans taken against Elena's properties without her knowledge or consent. The embezzlement ran deeper than anyone had suspected, a systematic looting of her inheritance that had been going on for 6 years. "Your uncle is ruined," Ravencrest told her on the second evening, showing her the compiled evidence. Even if Barrington weren't involved, Frederick would face criminal charges for fraud. The only question is whether we pursue prosecution or use this as leverage to keep him quiet. "What about Barrington?" Ravencrest's expression darkened. "That's more complicated. The evidence regarding his previous wives is circumstantial. Suspicious deaths and convenient commitments, but nothing we can prove beyond reasonable doubt. His lawyers are excellent, and he's protected by his title and connections. So he walks free. For now. But I've sent investigators to Yorkshire to interview his second wife. If she's willing to testify about what really happened, how she was declared insane, whether there was coercion or abuse, we might have grounds for a broader inquiry. And if she refuses? If she's too frightened? Then we find another way." His gray eyes met hers, determined and cold. "Barrington made a mistake when he threatened you in front of witnesses. He revealed how much this matters to him, how angry he is at losing his prize. Angry men make mistakes. We'll be watching for them." The night before the Westmere dinner, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of her room, no longer the blue guest room but the Duchess's suite, a sprawling apartment of interconnected chambers that felt more like a museum than living quarters. Everything was perfect, expensive, and utterly foreign. A knock startled her. Ravencrest entered, still fully dressed despite the late hour. "You're awake." "I'm terrified," Elena admitted. "Tomorrow I have to convince London's elite that I'm worthy of being a duchess, when I can barely convince myself." "You don't have to convince them of anything. You are a duchess. The title is yours by law, regardless of what they think." He moved to stand beside her at the window, looking out at the darkened street. "But I understand the fear. When I inherited the duchy at 24, I was convinced everyone could see right through me, that they all knew I was just a boy playing at being a duke. What changed? I realized they were all playing the same game. Every lord and lady in that ballroom tomorrow is performing a role. The trick isn't to be genuine, it's to be convincing." He glanced at her. "You're good at that already. You've been performing the obedient ward for months while planning your escape. This is just a different audience. A much more dangerous one. Perhaps. But you have something they don't expect. What's that?" "The truth." His smile was slight but real. "Your story. Escaping a forced marriage, evading a conspiracy, fighting for your freedom. It's extraordinary. And the beautiful thing about truth is that it doesn't require you to remember your lies. You just have to be careful about which truths you reveal and when." Elena turned to face him fully. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's about justice for Emily Hartford or stopping Barrington. There's something else." Ravencrest was quiet for a long moment. "My father spent his life accumulating power and using it to crush anyone weaker than himself. He was a duke, and he wielded that position like a weapon. When he died, I inherited his title, his wealth, his estates, and his reputation. Every time I enter a room, people see him first. They expect cruelty disguised as charm, manipulation dressed as courtesy. You're nothing like that. I know, but proving it requires action, not words. Helping you, stopping Barrington, using my power to protect rather than harm, it's a small start at rebuilding what my father destroyed." He met her eyes. "So yes, this is partly about justice, but it's also about becoming the kind of duke I can live with being." Before Elena could respond, the sound of shattering glass erupted from somewhere below. Shouting followed, then running footsteps. Ravencrest was moving instantly, his hand reaching for something in his coat. A pistol, Elena realized with shock. He'd been carrying a loaded pistol. "Stay here. Lock the door." Like hell, Elena grabbed a heavy candlestick from the mantel. "Someone just broke into your house. I'm not hiding while you face them alone." His expression flickered between annoyance and something that might have been approval. Fine, but stay behind me. They descended the stairs to find chaos in the entrance hall. Graves stood guard over a man sprawled on the marble floor, blood streaming from his nose. Two more servants had cornered another intruder near the drawing room, and in the center of it all stood Mrs. Winters, holding a fireplace poker like a sword. They came through the library window, she reported crisply. 3 of them. We've caught 2. The third ran when I struck him with this. Ravencrest approached the man on the floor, recognition dawning. I know you. You work for Frederick Whitford. The man spat blood. We're just retrieving what belongs to him. His ward is now my wife. She belongs to no one but herself. Ravencrest's voice was ice. Who sent you? Whitford or Barrington? Don't know what you're talking about. Really? Ravencrest nodded to Graves. Send for the magistrate. Let's see if a night in a cell loosens his memory. You can't prove nothing, the second intruder said, struggling against the footman holding him. We're just thieves. Picked the wrong house, that's all. Thieves who went straight for the Duchess's former room and ignored the silver in the dining room? Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow. How remarkably selective. Elena stepped forward, studying the men. They were rough types, hired muscle, exactly the kind Frederick would employ for dirty work. You were supposed to kidnap me, weren't you? Drag me back to my uncle before the marriage could be formalized with the church registry. The man on the floor's expression confirmed it before he could stop himself. Well, Ravencrest said softly, that makes this attempted abduction, rather than simple burglary, a much more serious crime. Graves, we definitely want the magistrate for this. As the servants hauled the intruders away to be locked in the cellar until authorities arrived, Catherine appeared on the stairs, wrapped in a dressing gown and looking furious. Please tell me Frederick Whitford isn't stupid enough to have ordered a kidnapping the night before your public debut. Apparently, he is exactly that stupid, Elena said. The candlestick was still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Or desperate, or both. This changes things. Catherine descended the rest of the stairs. We can't wait 2 weeks for the ball. We need to move faster, make you visible immediately. If Frederick is willing to risk a criminal act to get you back, he's not going to stop just because you appeared at a few dinners. The Westmere dinner is tomorrow, Ravencrest said. That's our first step. It's not enough. We need something bigger, more public, more definitive. Catherine's eyes suddenly brightened with dangerous inspiration. The theater. The opening of the new season at Drury Lane is in 2 days. Every important family in London will be there. If we arrive together, take a prominent box, make a spectacle of the new Duchess, that's not making Elena visible, that's painting a target on her back. The target's already there, Adrian. This just makes sure everyone sees her before Barrington can destroy her reputation in whispers and rumors. Catherine turned to Elena. Are you brave enough for that? To walk into a theater full of people who will be dissecting your every move, your every word? Elena thought of the men who'd just tried to kidnap her, of her uncle's desperate rage, of Barrington's cold promise that this wasn't over. Yes. Then we do both. Westmere dinner tomorrow to secure political allies, theater the following night to claim your place in society. Catherine's smile was fierce. Let them see what they're up against. The Westmere dinner was every bit as harrowing as Elena had feared. The moment she and Ravencrest arrived at the imposing townhouse, she felt the weight of scrutiny like physical pressure. Conversation stuttered to silence as they entered. Every eye tracked their progress through the receiving line. Lady Westmere, a formidable woman in her 60s, examined Elena with the intensity of a jeweler assessing a questionable gemstone. So you're the mysterious bride we've all been hearing about. How extraordinary that the Duke managed to court you without anyone noticing. We valued our privacy, Lady Westmere, especially given my complicated family situation. Ah, yes, Frederick Whitford. Lady Westmere's expression soured. I heard he made quite a scene at your husband's townhouse. Very undignified. My uncle was distressed by my marriage. I hope he'll come to accept it in time. I doubt it. Not when he's lost access to your considerable fortune. The older woman's eyes sharpened. You are aware that many people will assume you married for money and title. Elena met her gaze steadily. I married for protection from a forced match to a man whose previous wives all suffered tragic fates. If that makes me a fortune hunter in society's eyes, I can live with that judgment. Silence rippled outward from this bold statement. Lady Westmere's eyebrows rose, then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Well, at least you're honest. I appreciate that more than false modesty. She glanced at Ravencrest. Your Grace, I believe you found yourself quite a wife. Do try not to let society tear her apart before she's had a chance to prove herself. I'll do my best. They moved into the dining room, where place cards directed them to seats that separated them by half the table's length, a deliberate choice meant to force Elena to manage conversations without her husband's support. She found herself between Lord Pemberton, a pompous boor who spent the first course describing his hunting lodge in tedious detail, and Mrs. Fairfax, the romantic Catherine had warned her about. My dear Duchess, Mrs. Fairfax gushed as the second course arrived, you simply must tell me about the courtship. Everyone's dying to know how the Duke of Ravencrest, of all people, fell in love. He's been immune to feminine charms for years. Elena deployed the smile Catherine had made her practice. We met at a ball. He asked me to dance, and I found him far more interesting than the other gentlemen present. We began corresponding, and I discovered that beneath his reserved exterior was someone remarkably kind and principled. How wonderfully romantic! And your uncle had no idea? Uncle Frederick was preoccupied with his own concerns. He didn't pay much attention to my social activities. Elena chose her words carefully, which is why his reaction to our marriage was so extreme. He felt betrayed, I think, that I'd acted independently. But surely any guardian would be delighted by such an advantageous match. You would think so. Elena let a hint of sadness color her voice. Unfortunately, my uncle had already made commitments on my behalf, commitments I had no intention of honoring. Mrs. Fairfax leaned closer, hungry for gossip. Lord Barrington, you mean? Is it true he was courting you? It's true my uncle arranged for Lord Barrington to court me, but I never accepted his suit. Elena's expression hardened slightly. I found his particular history with previous wives troubling. Oh my! Mrs. Fairfax's eyes went wide. You don't mean to suggest— I don't suggest anything. I merely observe that marrying a man whose 3 previous wives were all declared insane and locked away seemed unwise. The comment rippled down the table. Several conversations paused. Across from Elena, a younger woman whose name she'd forgotten stared with undisguised fascination. Lord Pemberton cleared his throat uncomfortably. Careful with such implications, Your Grace. Barrington is well connected. So am I now. Elena smiled sweetly. The advantage of marrying a duke. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to the drawing room while the men remained for port and cigars. Elena found herself immediately surrounded by curious women, all deploying various strategies to extract information or deliver veiled insults. Such an unusual situation, Lady Catherine Pemberton, no relation to Elena's late father, said, her tone dripping false sympathy. Married in such haste with no family present, some might say it suggests unseemly eagerness. Or strategic timing, Elena countered. My uncle was attempting to force me into a marriage I didn't want. Marrying Ravencrest removed me from his control. I'd call that wisdom, not eagerness. Still, one wonders what the Duke saw in such a hasty arrangement. He could have any woman in England. Perhaps that's why he chose someone who didn't want his title or money. Novelty can be attractive. A few women actually laughed at that. Lady Catherine Pemberton flushed and retreated. The evening continued in this fashion, verbal sparring disguised as polite conversation, strategic revelations wrapped in seeming confessions. By the time they left, Elena felt wrung out, every muscle tense from maintaining perfect posture and perfect responses. In the carriage home, Ravencrest studied her with something like admiration. You did well. Westmere's wife approves of you, which means half of Parliament will follow suit. And your comment about Barrington's wives has already started circulating. Was that wise? Antagonizing him publicly? It was necessary. Barrington's power comes from silence and social protection. The more people willing to question his past openly, the weaker his position becomes. Ravencrest's expression darkened. Though I expect retaliation, he won't let this stand. The retaliation came faster than anyone anticipated. The next morning, broadsheets across London published nearly identical stories. The headlines varied, but the content was damning. Duke's mysterious bride, fortune hunter, or madwoman? Questions surround hasty Raven Crest marriage. New Duchess's troubled past revealed. The articles painted Elena as unstable, possibly unbalanced, with a history of wild accusations and erratic behavior. They claimed she'd been confined to her room by her guardian for her own safety, that she'd invented conspiracy theories about Lord Barrington out of jealousy when he'd politely declined her advances, that Ravencrest had been seduced or tricked into marriage by a calculating opportunist. Barrington's work, Catherine said grimly, reading through the stack of papers in Ravencrest's library. He must have bribed half the editors in London to run these simultaneously. Elena stared at the words, her stomach churning. Madwoman. Unstable. Confined for her own safety. The exact narrative Barrington had planned to use to lock her away, now deployed as a weapon to destroy her socially instead. Can we counter it? Ravencrest demanded. Print the truth about Frederick's embezzlement, about Barrington's previous wives? Not without proof that will stand up in court, Catherine said. Right now it's our word against his. And these articles have poisoned the well. Anything we publish now will look like defensive lies from a desperate woman and the Duke she manipulated. So we're just supposed to accept this? No. Elena stood, her fear transmuting into cold fury. We go to the theater tomorrow exactly as planned. We show them I'm not hiding, not ashamed, not breaking under the pressure. Let them print whatever lies they want. I'll stand in front of them all and dare them to call me mad to my face. That's dangerous, Ravencrest said. The theater will be hostile now. People who might have been neutral will be actively antagonistic. Good. Let them show their true faces. Elena's hands clenched into fists. I'm done being afraid. I'm done running and hiding and hoping someone else will save me. If this is war, then I'm going to fight. Catherine and Ravencrest exchanged glances. Then Catherine smiled, sharp and proud. Well then, let's give them a show they'll never forget. The night of the theater, Elena dressed with the care of a soldier donning armor. The gown was Catherine's choice, deep sapphire silk that matched her wedding ring, cut to emphasize elegance rather than youth, styled to project authority rather than submission. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate coronet of braids, the Duchess's diamond tiara glittering in the lamplight. You look terrifying, Catherine said with satisfaction. Exactly right. I feel terrified. Use it. Let them see fire, not fear. The carriage ride to Drury Lane felt both endless and far too short. Elena could see the crowds already gathering, the theater blazing with light. Their arrival would be spectacle, performance, a public declaration that the new Duchess of Ravencrest refused to be cowed. Ravencrest took her hand as they waited for the carriage to reach the entrance. It's not too late to turn back. We could return home, weather this privately. No. Elena squeezed his hand. Forward, always forward. The carriage door opened. The crowd's murmur rose to a roar. Elena stepped out into the lights, into the stairs, into the storm of whispers and gasps. She kept her head high, her expression serene, her hand steady on Ravencrest's arm as they ascended the theater steps. Inside was worse. The lobby fell silent as they entered, hundreds of faces turning toward them. Elena felt the weight of their judgment like a physical blow. Suspicion, contempt, fascination, disgust, all of it focused on her with laser intensity. Someone laughed. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. Well, well, the madwoman makes her debut. Lord Barrington stood near the grand staircase, surrounded by a cluster of supporters, his smile venomous and triumphant. Your Grace, you look remarkably composed for someone who's supposed to be suffering from delusions. Have the doctors prescribed something helpful? The crowd held its collective breath. This was it. The public confrontation everyone had been anticipating. Elena released Ravencrest's arm and walked directly toward Barrington, her steps measured and deliberate. The crowd parted before her. Lord Barrington, her voice carried clearly through the silent lobby. How kind of you to inquire about my health. I assure you I'm perfectly well, certainly well enough to have escaped the fate you'd planned for me. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Let me refresh your memory. You planned to marry me. have me declared insane within 2 months, and lock me in an asylum while you seized my fortune. The same strategy you employed with your previous 3 wives." She raised her voice, addressing the entire lobby now. "Emily Hartford died in an asylum 11 months after Lord Barrington had her committed. Margaret Wells is still locked away in Yorkshire, and I'd very much like to know what happened to Anne Fitzgerald, your first wife, who disappeared so conveniently just 18 months after your wedding." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Barrington's face went white, then red with rage. "How dare you, these slanders!" "Are they slanders if they're true?" Elena stepped closer, refusing to back down. "I overheard you and my uncle planning it. Every detail, the timeline, the doctor you'd bribed, the asylum you'd chosen. I heard you laugh about how pretty I was and what a shame it would be to lock me away so soon." "Yes, she's insane," Barrington said to the crowd, his charm cracking. "Exactly as I told you. These are the ravings of a disturbed mind. Then prove it." Ravencrest's voice cut across him like steel. "If my wife is insane, if these are delusions, then you should welcome an inquiry. Open your records. Let us interview your previous wives. Explain to a magistrate why 3 healthy women all suffered sudden mental collapse shortly after marrying you." "I don't have to explain anything to you." "No, but you will have to explain it to the House of Lords." Ravencrest's smile was deadly. "I'm calling for a formal investigation into your marriages, and I'm introducing legislation to reform the laws around involuntary commitment so men like you can never again use asylums as prisons for inconvenient wives." The lobby erupted into chaos. Conversations exploded in every direction. Some people rallied to Barrington, crying slander and outrage. Others looked uncertain, questioning. A few, not many, but a few, looked at Elena with something like understanding. Barrington's control finally snapped. "You'll regret this," he hissed at Elena. "Both of you. I'll destroy you. You'll what?" Elena interrupted. "Lock me in an asylum? Oh, wait, you can't anymore. I'm not under my uncle's control. I'm the Duchess of Ravencrest, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you are." She turned her back on him, a deliberate insult, and walked toward the stairs leading to their box. Ravencrest followed, his hand on the pistol he still carried. They'd almost reached the staircase when someone grabbed Elena's arm, spinning her around. It was Frederick, her uncle, looking wild-eyed and desperate. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I did for you. Everything you stole from me, you mean?" Elena wrenched her arm free. "I know about the embezzlement, Uncle. Every forged document, every fraudulent sale. Ravencrest has investigators compiling evidence." "You're going to prison. If I go down, I'm taking you with me." Frederick's voice rose to a shout. "You think you're so clever running off and marrying a duke? You're still the same stupid girl who couldn't see what was right in front of her face. And you're the same incompetent gambler who sold his own niece to pay his debts." Elena's voice stayed level, cold. "Tell me, Uncle, was £30,000 worth destroying whatever conscience you had left?" He struck her, not hard. Ravencrest caught his arm before the blow could land with real force, but the intent was clear. The crowd gasped. Several men rushed forward to pull Frederick back. Elena touched her cheek where his hand had grazed it, feeling the sting. Then she looked at the crowd of London's elite, all watching with rapt attention. "Let the record show," she said clearly, "that Frederick Whitford just attempted to assault his former ward in front of hundreds of witnesses. Add it to his list of crimes." The 2 large footmen appeared from somewhere, taking custody of Frederick as he struggled and cursed. Barrington had vanished into the crowd, smart enough to distance himself from the scene. Ravencrest wrapped his arm around Elena, solid and protective. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm angry." She looked up at him. "Can we still watch the performance? Or have we provided enough drama for one evening?" His smile was genuine for the first time that night. "Let's watch the performance. We've earned it." They climbed to their box, the ducal box, prominently positioned where everyone could see them, and took their seats as the curtain rose. Elena could feel every eye in the theater on them, could hear the whispers that would fuel gossip for weeks. But she'd done it. She'd faced them all. She'd stood in front of Barrington and her uncle and the entire upper echelon of London society and refused to break. The opera began, something Italian and dramatic that Elena couldn't focus on. Her heart was still racing, adrenaline making her hands shake, But beneath the fear and exhaustion, she felt something else. Power. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt powerful. At the intermission, visitors began arriving at their box. Some curious, some supportive, all wanting to assess the scandalous new Duchess for themselves. Elena deployed every skill Catherine had taught her, navigating conversations with strategic precision. And then, halfway through the second act, a messenger appeared at the box door with an urgent note for Ravencrest. Elena watched his expression darken as he read it. "What's wrong?" "My investigators in Yorkshire." His voice was low, meant only for her. "They found Barrington's second wife, Margaret Wells. She was willing to talk, to tell them everything about how she was committed, what really happened." "That's good news, isn't it?" "It was, past tense." He handed her the note. "She died 3 hours ago." Before she could give a formal statement, "The asylum is claiming it was her heart, completely natural. But the timing—" Elena read the note, ice flooding her veins. The timing was impossible to ignore. The same day Elena had publicly accused Barrington, the one witness who could have corroborated her story died suddenly. "He had her killed." The words came out flat, certain. "He found out about the investigation and had her murdered." "We can't prove that." "We don't need to prove it. We need to survive it." Elena's mind raced. If he's willing to kill a woman in an asylum to silence her, what's he willing to do to us? Ravencrest's hand moved to his pistol again. "We increase security, double the guards, vary our routes, trust no one outside our immediate circle." "That's not enough. We need—" The crack of a gunshot split the air. Screaming erupted throughout the theater. People stampeded toward exits. Ravencrest threw Elena to the floor of the box, covering her with his body. "Stay down!" Another shot. The sound of breaking glass. Someone in a box across the theater shrieked. "It's coming from the upper gallery," Ravencrest said, not moving from his protective position over Elena. "Can you see?" A third shot shattered the lamp beside their box, plunging them into darkness. And in that darkness, Elena heard Ravencrest's sharp intake of breath, felt his weight shift as he collapsed against her. "Adrian?" Her hands found wetness spreading across his shoulder. Blood. "Adrian!" "I'm fine," he gasped, but his voice was strained with pain. "Just my shoulder. He wasn't fine. Elena could feel the blood soaking through his coat, hot and terrifying. Someone had shot him. Someone had fired a gun into a crowded theater and shot the Duke of Ravencrest, shot him while he was protecting her. "Help!" Elena screamed into the chaos. "Someone help us! The Duke's been shot!" But her voice was lost in the pandemonium, drowned out by hundreds of terrified people fleeing for their lives. And somewhere in that darkness, the assassin was reloading. Catherine appeared out of the chaos like an avenging angel, 3 armed footmen at her back. She took one look at her brother slumped against Elena and went pale but didn't hesitate. "Get them out, now, through the private exit behind the box." The footman lifted Ravencrest between them, his head lolling, blood streaming down his arm. Elena grabbed his hand, refusing to let go as they half-carried, half-dragged him through a narrow door she hadn't noticed before. It led to a servants' corridor, dimly lit and blessedly empty. "Keep pressure on the wound," Catherine ordered, pressing Elena's hands against Ravencrest's shoulder. The blood was hot and wet, soaking through her gloves. "The carriage is waiting in the alley. We'll have him home in minutes." "We need a doctor." "Already sent for. Just keep him conscious." The corridor seemed endless. Elena stumbled along beside the footman, her hands slick with blood, her mind refusing to process what had just happened. Someone had shot him, shot at them, in a theater full of witnesses. This wasn't a social attack anymore. This was attempted murder. "Adrian?" She squeezed his hand. "Adrian, stay with me. You have to stay awake." "Still here." His voice was thread and pain, but present. "Takes more than one bullet to kill a Blackthorn." "Don't you dare joke right now." "Not joking." "Statement of fact. My grandfather survived 4 assassination attempts. Family tradition." They reached the carriage. Getting Ravencrest inside required careful maneuvering. He couldn't support his own weight, and every movement made him bite back curses of pain. Elena climbed in after him, cradling his head in her lap while Catherine barked orders to the driver. The ride home was a nightmare of jostling and blood and Ravencrest's increasingly shallow breathing. Elena kept talking to him, nonsense mostly, anything to keep him focused and present. "You're not allowed to die. Do you hear me? We have a war to win. I refuse to become a widow before I've even learned how to be a wife." Bossy. But his eyes stayed open, fixed on her face. "Knew you'd be trouble. You have no idea." They burst through the doors of the townhouse to find a doctor already waiting, summoned by whatever messenger Catherine had sent ahead. The man took one look at Ravencrest and pointed toward the library. "Get him on the table. I need good light and clean water. Someone find me more bandages." The next hour was a blur of activity. The doctor worked with swift efficiency, cutting away Ravencrest's blood-soaked coat and shirt, probing the wound while Ravencrest gritted his teeth and tried not to scream. Elena hovered nearby, feeling useless and terrified, her hand still stained with his blood. "The bullet went through," the doctor finally announced. "Missed the bone, thank heaven, but there's significant tissue damage. He'll need rest and careful monitoring for infection. But he should recover fully." Elena's legs nearly gave out with relief. Catherine caught her elbow, steadying her. "Sit down before you fall down." "I'm fine." "You're covered in blood and shaking like a leaf. Sit." Elena sat, watching as the doctor finished bandaging Ravencrest's shoulder and administering laudanum for the pain. Within minutes, the Duke's eyes were drooping, the tension finally leaving his face as the drug took effect. "Sleep now," the doctor said. "Best thing for him. I'll return tomorrow to check the wound. In the meantime, keep it clean and dry. Watch for fever. If he starts showing signs of infection, we'll send for you immediately," Catherine promised. After the doctor left, Catherine ordered the servants to carry Ravencrest upstairs to his bedroom. Elena followed, unwilling to leave him even though he was unconscious and beyond knowing whether she was there or not. Mrs. Winters appeared with clean clothes for Elena. "Your Grace, you should change. Get some rest yourself." "I'm staying with him." "Then at least let me help you out of that gown. You can't sit vigil covered in blood." Elena looked down at herself for the first time. The beautiful sapphire dress was ruined, dark stains spreading across the bodice and skirts. Her gloves were soaked through. She could feel dried blood cracking on her hands. Numbly, she let Mrs. Winters help her change into a simple day dress, scrub the blood from her skin. But as soon as the housekeeper finished, Elena returned to the chair beside Ravencrest's bed and refused to move. Catherine found her there an hour later, still staring at Ravencrest's unconscious form. "He's going to be fine, Elena." "Someone tried to kill him. Because of me. Because he helped me." "Someone tried to kill both of you. The first shot was aimed at you. It only hit Adrian because he threw himself in front of you." Catherine sat in the chair opposite. "This is Barrington's work. It has to be. The timing is too perfect. The same night you publicly accused him, someone fires shots into your box. Can we prove it?" "The authorities are searching the theater now. They found the rifle abandoned in the upper gallery, but the shooter escaped in the chaos. No witnesses who can identify them." Catherine's expression was grim. "But this changes everything. Barrington just escalated from social warfare to actual violence. He's desperate, which means dangerous, but also vulnerable. Desperate people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind we can exploit." Catherine leaned forward. "Here's what we know. Barrington murdered his second wife to silence her. Then he tried to have you and Adrian killed in a public place. Those aren't the actions of a man in control. Those are the actions of someone whose carefully constructed lies are collapsing around him. So we push harder, make him panic more." "Exactly. But we do it smart." Catherine pulled out a stack of papers. "While you were at the theater, I was busy. I have statements from 3 former servants of Barrington's households. They're willing to testify about suspicious circumstances surrounding his wife's commitments, forged medical documents, bribes to doctors, threats against anyone who questioned the diagnoses." Elena's pulse quickened. "That's evidence, real evidence. It's a start. Combined with what happened tonight, it might be enough to force an investigation. The Lords can't ignore an assassination attempt against a duke, especially when it's clearly connected to accusations about Barrington." "What about Frederick, my uncle?" "Being held by authorities for assault. His attack on you at the theater was witnessed by hundreds of people, including several judges and members of parliament. He's finished. Even if we didn't have the embezzlement evidence, he's ruined socially. Catherine smiled slightly. You handled that beautifully, by the way. Goading him into losing control in public. Very strategic. It didn't feel strategic. It felt like rage. Sometimes they're the same thing. Catherine stood. Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow we take the fight to Barrington in earnest. But tonight, rest. Adrian's going to be fine, and you need your strength for what comes next. After Catherine left, Elena finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the night's events. She'd stood in a theater full of hostile strangers and refused to break. She'd confronted Barrington publicly, exposed her uncle's abuse, survived an assassination attempt, and Ravencrest had taken a bullet meant for her. Why? They barely knew each other. Their marriage was a strategic arrangement, nothing more. He'd helped her because of his vendetta against Barrington, his desire to be different from his father, his need to prove himself worthy of his title. But when that gun fired, he hadn't calculated odds or considered strategy. He'd simply moved without thought or hesitation, placing his body between her and the bullet. Elena reached out and gently took his hand, careful not to disturb the bandaged shoulder. His fingers were warm, alive, steady, even in unconsciousness. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For the carriage, the marriage, the protection. For seeing me when everyone else just saw a problem to be solved or a prize to be won. I won't let Barrington destroy you for helping me. I promise. Ravencrest didn't answer, lost in laudanum dreams, but his fingers curled slightly around hers, holding on even in sleep. Elena stayed there through the night, watching over the man who'd become her unexpected ally, her unwitting partner, and perhaps, though she barely dared acknowledge the thought, something more. Morning brought complications and revelations in equal measure. Ravencrest woke fevered but lucid, refusing to stay in bed despite the doctor's stern orders. He insisted on being present when Catherine briefed them on the previous night's aftermath. The newspapers are calling it the theater massacre, though only one person was actually shot, Catherine reported, spreading the morning editions across the library table. You're both famous now. Or infamous, depending on which paper you read. The headlines were sensational. Duke shot defending mysterious bride. Violence erupts at Drury Lane after scandalous accusations. New Duchess claims Lord Barrington murdered previous wives. Shots fired in response. At least they're printing my accusations now, Elena said. That's something. It's more than something. It's a shift in the narrative. Catherine pointed to one particular article. This one's from the London Chronicle. They actually investigated. They found records of Emily Hartford's commitment, interviewed asylum staff who say her death was suspicious. They're asking questions publicly now. Ravencrest scanned the article, his expression sharpening despite the pain that tightened his jaw. This is Harold Winter's work. He's their senior investigative reporter and an old friend. I may have suggested he look into Barrington's background. When? The day after we married. I wanted insurance. He looked at Elena. You were right to be frightened of Barrington. The more I learned about him, the more I understood we were dealing with someone truly dangerous. So I made sure someone independent was also investigating, someone whose findings wouldn't be dismissed as biased. And last night's shooting just gave Winters the perfect angle to pursue the story openly, Catherine added. Public violence against the Duke and Duchess investigating historical crimes. It's sensational enough that other papers will have to follow. Elena felt hope kindle for the first time since the gunshots. So public opinion might actually turn against Barrington? It already is in some quarters. Look, Catherine showed her another paper, this one featuring editorial commentary. They're calling for a formal inquiry, not just into last night's shooting, but into Barrington's entire history with his wives. A knock interrupted them. Graves entered, looking unusually agitated. Your Grace, you have visitors, Lord Westmere and 2 other members of the Lords. They say it's urgent. Ravencrest struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. Elena moved to support him, and he leaned on her without protest, a measure of how much pain he was in. Show them to the drawing room. Tell them we'll be there shortly. Adrian, you should be in bed, Catherine protested. I should be wherever political allies need me to be. He glanced down at his bandaged shoulder. Though I'll need a coat that fits over this. 5 minutes later, somewhat presentable despite his pallor, Ravencrest entered the drawing room with Elena at his side. Lord Westmere stood with two other distinguished older men, all three looking grave. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion so early after your ordeal." Westmere's gaze flickered to the bandaged shoulder. "We've come on rather urgent business." "I'm at your service." "We represent a coalition in the Lords that's been quietly monitoring Lord Barrington for some time. Last night's events have forced our hand. We can no longer afford to remain quiet." Westmere gestured to his companions. "Lord Marshal and Lord Pemberton have both lost relatives to questionable asylum commitments. When your wife made her accusations at the theater, it crystallized suspicions we've harbored for years." "You believe her?" Elena couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Lord Marshal answered, his voice heavy with old grief. "My niece died in an asylum 5 years ago. She was committed by her husband against her family's protests. The doctors claimed she was violently insane, but I never believed it. She was the sanest, kindest woman I knew." He paused. "Her husband was a close friend of Lord Barrington's. After she died, he inherited her fortune and remarried within 6 months." "The pattern repeats," Lord Pemberton added. "Women married to men in Barrington's circle, declared insane, locked away, dying conveniently, or disappearing entirely. We've identified at least 8 cases beyond Barrington's own wives." Ravencrest's expression went very still. "8 cases? That we can prove. We suspect more." Westmere leaned forward. "Here's what we're proposing. A formal inquiry led by the Lords, with full investigative powers. We examine every asylum commitment in the last decade where substantial inheritance was involved. We interview the women still alive, exhume bodies where families request it, and prosecute anyone we find complicit in these schemes." "You're talking about exposing a massive conspiracy," Catherine breathed. "We're talking about ending one." Westmere's jaw set. These men have been using madness as a weapon, asylums as prisons, and the law as their accomplice. It ends now. But we need your help. The Duchess of Ravencrest is the first woman brave enough to escape this trap and speak publicly about it. Her testimony will be crucial. Elena's throat went tight. "What exactly do you need from me?" "Everything. Your uncle's conspiracy with Barrington, the embezzlement, what you overheard about their plans. We need you to testify before the Lords, to give a formal statement that will become part of the official record." "When?" "As soon as you're able. We're calling an emergency session for 3 days from now." Westmere's expression softened. "I won't lie to you, Your Grace, or this will be brutal. Barrington's allies will attack your credibility, your character, your sanity. They'll drag your name through the mud and try to paint you as exactly what Barrington claimed, a hysterical woman with delusions of conspiracy." "Let them try." Elena's voice came out stronger than she felt. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." "Then we have a fight on our hands." Westmere stood, the other lords rising with him. "One more thing. Last night's shooting. We have reason to believe it wasn't an isolated incident. Our sources suggest Barrington has hired additional men. You should both exercise extreme caution." After the lords departed, Ravencrest turned to Elena. "You don't have to do this. Testifying before the lords will expose you to exactly the kind of scrutiny you've been trying to avoid." "I know, but if there are 8 other women, if this is bigger than just Barrington and me, then I have to try. I can't hide while other women suffer." "You're remarkable." The words were quiet but sincere. "And terrifying." "Good. Barrington should be terrified." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Catherine drilled Elena on parliamentary procedure, what to expect from questioning, how to maintain composure under hostile interrogation. Ravencrest's investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Davies, compiled every scrap of evidence they had into a coherent narrative. And Harold Winters published another article, this one even more damning than the first. He'd found Anne Fitzgerald, Barrington's first wife, alive in a remote asylum in Cornwall. After 15 years of imprisonment, she was willing to talk. Her testimony was devastating: forced medication, falsified medical records, a husband who visited once to tell her she'd never leave, that she was dead to the world. The article caused a sensation. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Barrington's wives. Questions were being asked in every drawing room, every club, every corner of polite society. Barrington fought back with everything he had. His lawyers filed defamation suits against the London Chronicle. His allies in Parliament called for Elena to be arrested for slander. He gave interviews painting himself as the victim of a conspiracy by a deranged woman and her ambitious husband. But the momentum had shifted. Too many people were asking too many questions. Too much evidence was emerging from too many sources. The night before Elena's testimony, she couldn't eat dinner. She paced the library while Ravencrest watched, his arms still in a sling but his color improved. What if they don't believe me? What if Barrington's lawyers tear apart my testimony? Then we'll rebuild it. But Elena, look at me. She stopped pacing, met his steady gray gaze. You've already won the hardest battle. You survived. You escaped. You stood up publicly and refused to be silenced. Whatever happens tomorrow, that victory can't be taken from you. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like standing on a cliff edge. Then I'll stand there with you. He crossed to where she stood, took her hands in his. You're not alone in this. You've never been alone in this. Whatever they throw at you tomorrow, we face it together. The sincerity in his voice, the warmth of his hands, the way he looked at her like she was worth protecting. It all crashed over Elena at once. This man, this reclusive duke she'd known for less than 2 weeks, had become the center of her world, her partner, her ally. Maybe more than that, though she hardly dared examine the feeling too closely. Thank you, she whispered, for all of it, for believing me when you had no reason to. I had every reason. You climbed into my carriage with mud on your boots and terror in your eyes and still managed to lie convincingly about being a companion fleeing an employer. That takes remarkable courage. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I knew right then you were someone worth helping. Even though I was trouble? Especially because you were trouble. His smile was slight but genuine. I told you, my father spent his life using his power to destroy, helping you, fighting this fight. It's proof that I can be different, that the title doesn't have to corrupt. So really, I should be thanking you. For getting you shot? For giving me a purpose beyond maintaining estates and attending tedious parliamentary sessions. He was standing very close now, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth of him, see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. For reminding me that power is only meaningful when it's used to protect rather than exploit. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Elena couldn't quite name. Then Ravencrest stepped back, releasing her hands with what might have been reluctance. Get some rest. Tomorrow changes everything. The chamber of the House of Lords was ancient, imposing, designed to make anyone entering feel small and insignificant. Rows of peers sat in judgment, their faces ranging from sympathetic to openly hostile. At the front, Lord Westmere presided, flanked by the other inquiry leaders. And across the chamber, surrounded by his lawyers and allies, sat Lord Barrington. His expression was confident, almost amused, as though this were all a game he'd already won. Elena took her seat in the witness chair, her hands folded to hide their trembling. Ravencrest sat in the gallery reserved for family, his presence a solid anchor in the sea of hostile faces. The Duchess of Ravencrest will give testimony regarding allegations against Lord Marcus Barrington, Westmere announced. Your Grace, please recount for this chamber the events that led to your marriage and the accusations you've made. Elena took a breath. Then she began to speak. She told them everything. The night she'd overheard her uncle and Barrington planning her fate. The conspiracy to have her declared insane and institutionalized. The embezzlement of her inheritance, her desperate flight, and her marriage to Ravencrest, the attempted kidnapping, and the shooting at the theater. She spoke for nearly an hour, her voice never wavering, her gaze never dropping. And as she spoke, she watched the faces of the lords around her, saw doubt begin to crack in some expressions, saw belief dawn in others. When she finished, Barrington's lead lawyer stood. He was a thin man with a voice like acid. Your Grace, isn't it true that you were confined to your room by your guardian for episodes of hysteria? I was locked in my room for 3 days without food because I refused to marry Lord Barrington. My uncle called it hysteria. I called it resistance. And isn't it true that you've made these wild accusations because Lord Barrington rejected your advances? Lord Barrington never rejected anything. I rejected him. That's why this conspiracy was necessary. I wouldn't go willingly, so they planned to take my consent by force. You expect this chamber to believe that a respected peer of the realm plotted to murder you? I expect this chamber to look at the evidence. 3 wives, all committed to asylums, all conveniently dying or disappearing. Lord Barrington's second wife died the same day your investigators tried to interview her. An assassination attempt was made on my life and my husband's the night I publicly accused Lord Barrington. If that's coincidence, it's a remarkably convenient one. The lawyer's expression soured. You have no proof of any connection between Lord Barrington and these incidents. Then let him prove there's no connection. Let him open his records. Let him explain why every woman he marries ends up locked away. Let him account for where he was when Margaret Wells died and when shots were fired at the theater. The burden of proof lies with the accuser, not the accused. Then examine the proof. Elena gestured to the documents Davies had compiled. Bank records showing my uncle's embezzlement, testimony from asylum staff about suspicious deaths, statements from servants who witnessed Barrington's abuse of his wives, letters from families who lost daughters to convenient diagnoses of insanity. It's all there. Unless you're afraid of what you'll find. A murmur ran through the chamber. The lawyer tried several more lines of attack, but Elena had been well prepared. She deflected, countered, refused to be rattled. Finally, Lord Westmere called for a recess. Elena stepped down from the witness chair, her legs shaking but her head high. Ravencrest was waiting in the corridor. You were magnificent. I don't know if they believed me. Some did. I could see it. He glanced back toward the chamber. This isn't over, but it's a start. The inquiry reconvened that afternoon to hear from Anne Fitzgerald. The woman who'd been Barrington's first wife was barely recognizable as human, gaunt, hollow-eyed, her hands trembling constantly from years of forced medication, but her mind, though damaged, was clear enough. He told me I was mad, she whispered to the silent chamber. Over and over, until I almost believed it. Said no one would ever believe me, that I'd die in that place and everyone would think it was mercy. But I'm not mad. I never was. I just had money he wanted and a spine he couldn't break. Her testimony lasted less than 30 minutes, but it was more powerful than anything Elena could have said. Here was living proof of Barrington's crimes, a woman who'd survived 15 years of imprisonment to tell her truth. When she finished, Barrington's lawyer tried to discredit her, claimed the asylum had damaged her mind, that her testimony was unreliable, that she was confused and bitter. But Anne Fitzgerald looked directly at Barrington and said, I remember everything. Every visit you made to tell me I was forgotten. Every time you threatened the staff to keep me drugged. Every cent you stole while I rotted in that cell. I remember all of it, and I'll never forgive you. The chamber erupted, peers shouting for order, Barrington's face white with rage, his lawyers scrambling to object. Through it all, Elena sat in the gallery beside Ravencrest and felt the tide turn. The inquiry lasted 3 more days. They heard from servants, doctors, asylum administrators, families of other victims. The evidence piled higher and higher, each testimony adding weight to the accusations. On the 4th day, Lord Westmere announced the findings. This inquiry has uncovered evidence of a systematic conspiracy to defraud and imprison women through false diagnoses of mental illness. While we cannot yet prove direct criminal culpability in all cases, the pattern is undeniable and deeply disturbing. He looked directly at Barrington. Lord Barrington, this chamber recommends that you face formal criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and suspicion of murder. Additionally, we are calling for immediate reform of commitment laws and oversight of private asylums. The chamber voted. The motion passed by a significant margin. Barrington was finished. Not arrested yet. His lawyers would delay that process for months, but politically and socially destroyed. No one would associate with him now. His allies had abandoned him. His reputation lay in ruins. That evening, Elena and Ravencrest returned home to find Catherine waiting with champagne. You did it. You actually did it. She poured 3 glasses, handed them around. Barrington's done. Frederick's facing prosecution. And you've started a movement to reform asylum laws that might save countless women. It's not over, Ravencrest cautioned. Barrington still has resources. He'll fight the charges. Let him fight. Elena raised her glass. He can't win. Too many people know the truth now. Too many voices speaking out. They drank, the champagne sweet and effervescent, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Elena allowed herself to feel something like triumph. She'd survived. She'd fought back. She'd won. Later that night, after Catherine had gone home and the servants had retired, Elena found Ravencrest in the library, staring into the fire. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much racing through my mind." He glanced at her. "You should be resting. You've earned it." "So have you." She settled into the chair opposite him. "Your shoulder, how is it?" "Healing. The doctor says I'll have full movement back within a month." He flexed the arm experimentally, winced, though perhaps not quite yet. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Ravencrest spoke. "When this is all over, when Barrington's trial is finished and Frederick's in prison and the laws are changed, what will you do?" "I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." Elena studied his profile in the firelight. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to be happy, to be free, to live the life you choose, not one forced on you by circumstances or desperation." He turned to meet her eyes. "Our marriage was born of necessity, not choice. Once you're safe, truly safe, you should have the option to leave if you wish, to live independently or remarry for love rather than protection." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they struck Elena like a blow. He was offering her freedom, the very thing she'd been fighting for. So why did it feel like losing something precious? "And if I don't want to leave?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Ravencrest went very still. "Elena, I know what our marriage was supposed to be, an arrangement, a strategic alliance, but somewhere between the carriage and the courtroom, it became something else." She stood, crossed to where he sat, knelt so she could meet his eyes directly. "You took a bullet for me. You fought for me when you had no obligation beyond a hastily signed marriage certificate. You believed me when no one else did. That's not just strategy or duty. That's care." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses. "I care about you, Elena. More than I should for a marriage of convenience. More than is wise for someone who's supposed to remain detached." "Then don't be detached." She leaned into his touch. "Don't send me away when this is over. Let me stay. Let this marriage be real. You deserve better than a reclusive duke with a wounded shoulder and a house full of ghosts. I deserve the man who saw me hiding in his carriage and chose kindness over convenience. The man who stood beside me in every battle, even when it cost him everything." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I deserve you, Adrian. If you'll have me." He pulled her up into his lap, mindful of his injured shoulder. His good arm wrapped around her waist, holding her close. "I've wanted you from the moment you challenged Lord Barrington in my entrance hall, from the moment you walked into that theater knowing you'd face a hostile crowd and did it anyway. You're the bravest, most magnificent woman I've ever known." His forehead touched hers. "And yes, I'll have you, for as long as you'll stay." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the brief, formal kiss at their wedding. This was heat and promise, and the sweet relief of admitting what had been building between them for weeks. Elena's hands tangled in his hair, and she kissed him back with everything she'd been holding inside, gratitude and desire, and the fierce joy of being seen and chosen and wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ravencrest smiled against her lips. "So, I suppose this means our marriage of convenience has been permanently inconvenienced." Elena laughed, the sound bright and free. "I suppose it has." Outside, London slept, unaware that in a townhouse in Mayfair, a duchess who'd once been a fugitive had just claimed her duke and her future with equal determination. And somewhere in the city, Lord Barrington received word that his assets were being frozen pending criminal investigation, and began to understand that he'd finally met an opponent he couldn't destroy. The next morning brought news that froze the blood in Elena's veins. She was reading through correspondence in the morning room when Graves appeared, his usually composed face ashen. "Your Grace, there's been a fire at Ravencrest Hall." The words didn't make sense at first. Ravencrest Hall, Adrian's ancestral estate in the countryside, the seat of the duchy, the sprawling manor he'd spent 10 years restoring from his father's neglect. "How bad?" Adrian's voice came from the doorway, sharp with alarm. The east wing is destroyed. The fire started near midnight. The staff evacuated safely, but Graves hesitated. Your Grace, the fire marshal says it was deliberately set. They found evidence of accelerant. Barrington. It had to be Barrington. Facing ruin and prosecution, he'd struck out one final time, aiming for Adrian's heritage itself. I need to go there. Adrian was already moving toward the stairs. Immediately. Graves, have the carriage prepared. I'm coming with you, Elena said. It's not safe. If Barrington set the fire, then he's already shown he's willing to destroy anything connected to you. I'm not staying in London while you ride into potential danger alone. She met his eyes with steel in her own. We're partners now, remember? We face things together. Something flickered in his expression. Frustration, admiration, resignation. Fine, but we bring armed guards. And Catherine. The journey to Ravencrest Hall took 4 hours, every mile stretching Elena's nerves tighter. What would they find? How much had been destroyed? And more importantly, would Barrington try again? They arrived to find the estate in chaos. Servants hauled buckets of water, though the fire had long since been extinguished. Smoke still rose from the blackened skeleton of the east wing. The smell of burnt wood and ash hung thick in the air. Adrian climbed down from the carriage and stood staring at the destruction, his face carved from stone. Elena slipped her hand into his, and his fingers closed around hers with bruising force. 50 years of restoration, he said quietly. My mother's sitting room, the family portrait gallery, the library she built. All gone. Mrs. Havisham, the estate housekeeper, hurried over, her face soot-stained and exhausted. Your Grace, thank heaven you're here. We did everything we could, but the fire spread so fast. Anyone hurt? No, Your Grace, we got everyone out safely, but the damage, she gestured helplessly at the ruins, can be repaired. Adrian's jaw set. What matters is that no one died. Everything else is just stone and wood. The fire marshal approached, a burly man with suspicious eyes. Your Grace, I need to ask some questions about enemies you might have. This fire was definitely arson. Someone wanted to send you a message. I know exactly who sent it. Adrian turned to Elena. This is Barrington's declaration of war. If he can't have you, he'll destroy everything I care about instead. Then we end this, Elena said. Now. Today. No more waiting for trials or investigations. We finish him. Catherine, who'd been examining the fire damage, turned sharply. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing we give Barrington exactly what he wants. Elena's mind raced, pieces clicking together. He's desperate, striking out wildly because his carefully controlled world is collapsing. Desperate men make mistakes, so we create an opportunity for him to make his biggest mistake yet. Explain, Adrian said. Barrington wants me dead. He wants both of us dead, preferably in a way that can't be traced back to him. So we give him the perfect opportunity. She looked between Adrian and Catherine. We announce that I'm traveling to Ravencrest Hall alone to oversee the restoration. No heavy guard, just a few servants. An isolated estate far from London, with the new Duchess conveniently vulnerable. Absolutely not, Adrian said flatly. You're suggesting using yourself as bait. I'm suggesting we set a trap. Let him come for me. Let him make his move where we can control the circumstances and have witnesses ready to catch him in the act. It's too dangerous. It's brilliant, Catherine interjected. And it might be our only chance to catch Barrington in an actual crime we can prove. Everything else is circumstantial, but if we catch him attempting murder, that's undeniable. Adrian shook his head. I won't risk Elena's life on a maybe. You already risked yours for mine. Elena moved to stand directly in front of him. Let me do the same. Let me be the one who brings Barrington down, not as a victim, but as the architect of his destruction. And if something goes wrong, then you'll be there to catch me. Because I'm not actually doing this alone, I'm just making it look that way. She could see the plan forming clearly now. We announce my travel publicly. We make it seem like I'm being foolish, overconfident, leaving myself exposed. But in reality, we'll have guards hidden throughout the estate, investigators watching every approach, and you stationed somewhere Barrington won't expect. When he makes his move, we spring the trap. Adrian was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Finally, he turned to the fire marshal. How quickly can you make the East Wing look more damaged than it actually is? I want it to seem like the Duchess is staying in the vulnerable West Wing because the rest of the house is uninhabitable. Give me 2 days, Your Grace. We can make it look like a disaster. Do it. Adrian turned back to Elena, his expression grim but determined. 2 days to prepare. Then we bait the trap and pray we're faster than he is. The next 48 hours were a controlled frenzy of preparation. Adrian's investigators mapped every possible approach to Ravencrest Hall, identifying hiding spots and lines of sight. Catherine hired additional guards who could blend in as servants. Davies coordinated with local magistrates to ensure legal authority for whatever happened, and Elena played her part perfectly. She gave an interview to the London Chronicle, expressing her determination to restore Ravencrest Hall despite the unfortunate accident of the fire. She mentioned casually that she'd be staying at the estate for at least a fortnight, overseeing the work personally. The Duke has business in London, she told the reporter with a brave smile. But I won't let this setback delay the restoration. Ravencrest Hall has survived centuries. It will survive this. The article published the next morning. By evening, word reached them through one of Davies's informants. Barrington had purchased a ticket on a coach heading toward the countryside near Ravencrest Hall. He took the bait, Catherine said grimly. He's coming. That night, Elena moved through Ravencrest Hall like a ghost, checking preparations one final time. The Bar's servants were actually former soldiers, armed and alert. The approaches to the estate were being watched around the clock, and Adrian, despite his protests, had agreed to hide in the priest hole behind the library, close enough to respond instantly, far enough to avoid being spotted before Barrington committed himself. Elena found him there in the darkness, loading pistols with methodical precision. Having second thoughts, she asked. Hundreds of them. All of them about whether I'm making the worst mistake of my life by allowing this. He set down the pistol and pulled her close. If anything happens to you, nothing will happen. We've prepared for every contingency. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This time tomorrow, Barrington will be in chains, and we can finally start living our lives. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me that if anything feels wrong, you'll run. I promise. She tilted her head up to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of all the words she hadn't yet found courage to speak. I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid. I know. I love you too. His arms tightened around her, which is why this is terrifying. I've already lost too much to that man's cruelty. I won't lose you. You won't. I'm harder to kill than I look. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the darkness, drawing strength from contact and warmth and the solid reality of being together. Then Elena pulled away, squared her shoulders, and went to face whatever came next. Barrington arrived on the second night, approaching the estate under cover of darkness exactly as they'd predicted. Elena watched from an upstairs window as shadowy figures moved through the gardens, converging on the west wing where she was supposedly sleeping. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything either worked perfectly or fell catastrophically apart. She made herself visible in the window, a candle lighting her silhouette, before retreating to the prepared bedroom. The guards had already taken their positions, 3 hidden in the dressing room, 2 more in the corridor. Davies himself concealed behind a decorative screen. Elena sat on the bed, appearing to read a letter by candlelight, while every nerve in her body screamed with tension. The window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor. A man came through fast, wrapped in dark clothes, a knife gleaming in his hand. Not Barrington himself, hired muscle, exactly as they'd expected. Scream and I'll cut your throat, the intruder hissed. Elena screamed anyway, loud and piercing and utterly terrified. The guards erupted from concealment. The intruder spun, knife flashing, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. Within seconds, he was pinned to the floor, disarmed, cursing viciously. Where's Barrington? Davies demanded, pressing a pistol to the man's head. You didn't come alone. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Davies cocked the pistol. I'm a poor shot when I'm angry. Might accidentally blow your head off before you finish being defiant. The gardens, the man spat. Waiting to make sure I did the job right. but I ain't saying nothing else." Adrian was already moving. Elena heard his footsteps pounding down the corridor, heard him shouting orders to the guards stationed outside. She followed, ignoring Davies's protests, her heart in her throat. She found Adrian in the formal gardens, surrounded by armed men, with Lord Barrington standing in the center like a cornered animal. He still wore his gentleman's clothes, but there was nothing civilized in his expression now, only raw hatred and the desperation of someone watching his final gambit collapse. "It's over, Barrington," Adrian said. "We have your man upstairs confessing you hired him. We have witnesses who saw you approach the estate. We have you, caught in the act of attempted murder." "You have nothing." Barrington's voice shook with rage. "That man will never testify. My lawyers will. Your lawyers can't save you from this." Elena stepped forward into the circle of lamplight. Barrington's eyes went wide, then narrow with pure malice. "You're finished. You'll hang for this. For Emily Hartford, for Margaret Wells, for Anne Fitzgerald, for every woman you destroyed. And I'll be there to watch. You should be dead." The words came out strangled. "You were supposed to be locked away, drugged into compliance, forgotten. How dare you? Fight back? Survive? Refuse to be your victim?" Elena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "I dared because I had no other choice, because you left me no choice, because you're a monster who's been hiding behind title and charm for too long." Barrington lunged at her, murder naked on his face, but Adrian was faster, putting himself between them, his pistol pressed to Barrington's chest. "Don't." The word was ice and death. "Don't give me an excuse." For a moment, the world balanced on a knife's edge. Then Barrington deflated, the fight draining out of him as he realized he'd truly lost. The local magistrate arrived with constables, drawn by the commotion. They took Barrington into custody, iron chains clanking as he was led away, still cursing, still threatening, still unable to accept that his reign of terror had finally ended. Elena watched until he disappeared into the darkness. Then her legs gave out, and Adrian caught her, held her as tremors racked her body. "It's done," he murmured into her hair. "It's over. You're safe now. Truly safe." She clung to him, letting herself finally feel the terror she'd been suppressing, the bone-deep relief of survival, the sweet victory of justice finally achieved. They stayed like that until the shaking subsided, until her breathing steadied, until the night's chaos settled into quiet triumph. Barrington's trial began 3 weeks later in a courtroom packed with spectators and journalists. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Testimony from Anne Fitzgerald and asylum staff, financial records showing his systematic theft from his wife's estates, and now the attempted murder of a duchess, with multiple witnesses and a hired killer willing to testify in exchange for clemency. Elena attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with Adrian at her side. She watched Barrington's composure crack and crumble as witness after witness dismantled his careful lies. Watched the jury's expressions shift from doubt to certainty to disgust. The verdict came swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to hang. When the sentence was read, Barrington finally looked at Elena. No charm now, no pretense. Just pure, impotent hatred. "This isn't justice," he spat. "It's revenge." "No," Elena said clearly, loudly enough for the whole courtroom to hear. "Justice is you finally facing consequences. Revenge would be you locked in an asylum for 15 years like Anne Fitzgerald. This is mercy you don't deserve." The bailiffs led him away. Elena watched him go and felt nothing but relief. Frederick Whitford faced his own reckoning shortly after. The embezzlement charges, combined with the assault at the theater, earned him 7 years in prison. He went to his cell still sputtering about ungrateful nieces and interfering dukes, unable to comprehend that his greed had finally caught up with him. Anne Fitzgerald recovered slowly but steadily in the care of a legitimate physician. Catherine found her a small cottage on the Ravencrest estate where she could heal in peace, surrounded by gardens instead of asylum walls. Other women who'd survived similar ordeals began coming forward, encouraged by Anne's example and Elena's advocacy. The asylum reform legislation passed the House of Lords by a substantial margin. New regulations required multiple independent medical opinions before commitment, mandatory annual reviews of all institutionalized patients, and severe penalties for doctors who accepted bribes to falsify diagnoses. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a crack in the system that had enabled so much suffering. 6 months after Barrington's execution, Elena stood in the restored East Wing of Ravencrest Hall, watching workers put finishing touches on the new library. The portraits had been restored, her mother-in-law's sitting room rebuilt exactly as it had been, every detail carefully researched and replicated. But there were changes, too. A new wing had been added, a refuge for women escaping dangerous marriages or guardianships, where they could stay safely while legal proceedings freed them from their prisons. Elena had insisted on it, and Adrian had agreed immediately. "It's what this place should always have been," he'd said. "A sanctuary, not a monument to dead dukes." Now, watching the sun set over the restored estate, Elena felt Adrian's arms wrap around her from behind. "Thinking about anything in particular?" he asked. "Everything. The woman I was 6 months ago, hiding in your carriage. How impossible this all would have seemed then. The you who hid in my carriage was brave enough to run when running was her only choice. I'm not surprised you turned that courage into something extraordinary." He turned her to face him. "Though I am grateful. If you hadn't climbed into my carriage that morning, you'd still be the reclusive Duke of Ravencrest, attending tedious sessions of Parliament and managing estates." She smiled. "Instead, you're the Duke who destroyed a conspiracy, reformed asylum laws, and created a refuge for women in danger. I think you got the better end of this arrangement." "I married the woman I love. I definitely got the better end." The words still sent warmth through her chest, even after months of hearing them. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Not since breakfast. I was beginning to worry." She laughed and kissed him, sweet and sure, and full of the joy of being exactly where she belonged. They were interrupted by Catherine's arrival, waving a letter triumphantly. "News from London! Harold Winters won a journalism award for his coverage of the Barrington case. He says he's dedicating it to you both." "We should send him champagne," Elena said. "Already did, along with an invitation to the winter ball." Catherine's eyes gleamed. "Which reminds me, the guest list is nearly complete. Every important family in England wants to attend the first ball at Ravencrest Hall since the Restoration." "Let them come," Adrian said. "Let them see what we've built here." The winter ball was held on a December evening when snow blanketed the estate in pristine white. The restored East Wing blazed with light and music, filled with guests who'd come from across England to see the legendary Duchess of Ravencrest and celebrate the estate's rebirth. Elena moved through the crowd in a gown of midnight blue velvet, the sapphire wedding ring catching candlelight as she greeted guests. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd fled a wedding. She was the Duchess of Ravencrest, political advocate, champion of asylum reform, and living proof that women could fight back and win. Lord Westmere approached with his wife, both smiling warmly. "Your Grace, the refuge wing is extraordinary. You've created something truly remarkable here." "We've created it," Elena corrected, gesturing to include Adrian and Catherine. "And it's only the beginning. We're working with Parliament to establish similar refuges in other counties. I've heard the Lords are calling you a revolutionary." "I prefer extremely motivated." Elena's smile sharpened. "There are still too many women trapped in situations like the one I escaped. I won't rest until every one of them has a way out." Spoken like someone who's changed the world and has no intention of stopping. After Lord Westmere moved on, Adrian appeared at Elena's elbow with champagne. "Having fun being celebrated?" "Having fun seeing how far we've come." She accepted the glass, then gestured to the crowded ballroom. "Look at them. 6 months ago, half these people thought I was a fortune-hunting madwoman. Now they're toasting my health and praising my work." "They were wrong then. They're right now." He raised his glass. "To you, Elena, the woman who escaped her cage and then came back to tear down the bars for everyone else." They drank, the champagne sweet on her tongue. Around them the ball continued, dancing and laughter and the warm glow of celebration. But Elena's attention was caught by a young woman hovering near the refuge wing entrance, looking uncertain. "Excuse me," Elena said to Adrian, handing him her glass. "I think someone needs help." She approached the young woman gently. "Hello. I'm Elena." "I know who you are, Your Grace." The woman's voice trembled. "Everyone knows your story." how you escaped, how you fought back. What's your name? Sarah Crawford. My guardian wants to marry me off to a man 3 times my age. I said no, and She swallowed hard. He says I'm being hysterical, that I need to be examined by doctors, and I'm so afraid. You're safe here. Elena took her hands, held them firmly. Right now, tonight, you're under the protection of the Duchy of Ravencrest. Your guardian can't touch you, and tomorrow we'll start the legal process to free you from his custody. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You do that? For a stranger? I do that for any woman brave enough to ask for help. Elena smiled. I know what it's like to be trapped with no way out. I'm not letting anyone else suffer that if I can prevent it. As she guided Sarah toward the refuge wing to meet the staff who would help her, Elena caught Adrian's eye across the ballroom. He was watching her with an expression of such love and pride that it made her heart ache with joy. This was what they'd built together, not just a restored estate or a reformed law, but a genuine sanctuary, a place where women could come broken and afraid and leave whole and empowered. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the ballroom stood empty, Elena found Adrian in their private sitting room, staring into the fire. Successful evening? She asked, settling beside him. Wildly successful. We raised enough donations to fund 3 more refuge wings. He pulled her against his side, and she tucked herself into the familiar warmth of him. And you saved another woman tonight. That makes 17 since we opened the refuge. 17 women who won't end up locked in asylums or trapped in abusive marriages. Elena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, where a secret she'd only just confirmed that morning waited to be shared. And soon there will be one more person counting on us to make the world safer. Adrian went very still. Elena, are you saying, I'm pregnant? The words came out soft but sure. I saw the doctor this morning. He estimates early summer for the birth. For a moment, Adrian said nothing. Then he pulled her fully into his lap, cradling her with desperate gentleness, his face buried in her hair. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, definitely. But happy beyond measure. His hand settled over her still flat stomach. This child will grow up in a world we're actively making better, in a house that's a sanctuary instead of a prison, with parents who chose each other and chose love. Parents who started as strangers in a carriage and became partners in revolution. Elena covered his hand with hers. I'd say that's a pretty good foundation. The best foundation. He kissed her, tender and reverent. I love you, Elena Blackthorne. My unexpected bride, my fiercest ally, the woman who changed everything. I love you too. My reluctant savior, my partner in justice, the man who saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. They stayed like that, wrapped together in firelight and promise, while snow fell soft outside and the future stretched ahead, bright with possibility. 5 months later, on a warm June morning, Elena gave birth to a daughter. They named her Margaret Ann. Margaret for Elena's mother, Anne for the woman who'd survived 15 years in an asylum and lived to see justice done. The baby had Adrian's gray eyes and Elena's stubborn chin. She came into the world screaming with outrage, and Elena laughed through tears at the sound. She's furious already, Adrian said, cradling his daughter with wonder. Takes after her mother. Takes after both of us, Elena corrected. Determined, fierce, and absolutely unwilling to accept injustice. Catherine arrived within hours, bearing gifts and immediate devotion to her new niece. She's perfect and terrifying. I predict she'll be running the duchy by age 5. Running England by age 10, Elena said. Taking over the world by 15, Adrian added. They all laughed, giddy with joy and exhaustion and the sweet perfection of new life. That evening, as sunset painted the nursery gold, Elena sat in the rocking chair by the window with Margaret sleeping in her arms. Adrian stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other gently touching their daughter's downy head. What are you thinking? He asked quietly. That a year ago I was hiding in your carriage, terrified and alone, with no idea what would happen next. She looked down at the baby in her arms, then up at the man she loved. And now I'm here. With you. With her. With a purpose and a partnership and a future I never could have imagined. Regret any of it? Not a single moment. Even the terrifying parts led us here, she smiled. What about you? Regret letting a muddy fugitive hide in your carriage? Best decision I ever made. He leaned down to kiss her temple. You gave me a purpose beyond maintaining estates, a family beyond obligation, a life worth fighting for. Margaret stirred in Elena's arms, making soft sleeping sounds. Elena looked out the window at Ravencrest Hall's grounds, the restored gardens, the refuge wing where 3 women currently resided in safety, the future spreading out before them like an unwritten story. She'd run from a forced marriage and found true partnership. She'd escaped conspiracy and built a movement. She'd been hunted and became a hunter of justice. She'd started as a victim and ended as a victor. But more than that, she'd started as Elena Whitford, invisible and powerless, and become Elena Blackthorne, Duchess of Ravencrest, advocate for the voiceless, and living proof that courage could change the world. The girl who'd fled Hartmoor Estate in a plain traveling dress was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd chosen her own path, fought her own battles, and built her own legacy. A woman who'd been offered safety and demanded justice instead. A woman who'd transformed a marriage of desperation into a partnership of love. A woman who'd survived the storm and emerged not just intact, but powerful. Tell me something, Adrian said softly. That morning in the carriage when you were hiding under the seat, did you ever imagine this? Us, together like this? Elena thought back to that terrified girl, fleeing everything she knew, with nothing but courage and desperation driving her forward. No, she admitted. I couldn't imagine anything beyond surviving the next hour, but I think... She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think that girl knew something I didn't consciously realize yet. That sometimes the scariest choice is the one that leads to the most extraordinary life. Climbing into a stranger's carriage. Running toward the unknown instead of accepting the prison I knew. She looked up at him. Best decision I ever made. We're matching now. Both claiming our best decisions involved that carriage ride. Because they did. Everything good in our lives traces back to that moment. Elena shifted Margaret in her arms, the baby's weight warm and solid and real. This little one exists because I was brave enough to run and you were kind enough to help. The refuge exists because we fought together. The laws changed because we refused to stay silent. All of it, every good thing, started with a choice to trust instead of fear. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, I have something to show you. I was waiting for the right moment, and I think this might be it. He left and returned carrying a large canvas covered with cloth. With careful ceremony, he removed the covering to reveal a portrait. It showed Elena on horseback, her hair loose and windblown, wearing riding clothes instead of ball gowns. Behind her was Ravencrest Hall, restored and magnificent. But it wasn't a typical Duchess portrait, all stiff formality and aristocratic poses. This Elena looked alive, fierce, caught mid-laugh with joy and defiance in every line. This was Elena as she truly was, not playing a role but claiming her power. I commissioned it the week after Barrington's trial, Adrian said. I wanted to capture you as I see you, not the proper Duchess society expects, but the woman who changed my world. Elena stared at the portrait, her throat tight with emotion. It's perfect. It's me. It's you triumphant, which is the only version of you I ever want to remember. He set the portrait aside and took her free hand. That scared girl in my carriage became this remarkable woman, and I get to stand beside her for the rest of our lives. That's the real miracle here. Margaret chose that moment to wake, her tiny face scrunching with pre-cry outrage. Elena and Adrian both laughed, the serious moment broken by the immediate needs of new parenthood. As Elena settled their daughter to feed, as Adrian moved around the nursery preparing for the evening routine, as the sun set over the estate they'd built together, Elena felt the last piece of old fear finally dissolve. She was safe. She was loved. She was powerful in all the ways that mattered. The bride who'd chosen the unknown had found something far greater than safety. She'd found herself. And in finding herself, she'd built a legacy that would outlast them all, refuge for the desperate, hope for the trapped, and proof that courage could triumph over conspiracy. The girl who'd run became the woman who stood and fought, and she would never run again. Outside, night fell over Ravencrest Hall, wrapping the estate in gentle darkness. Inside, light blazed from every window, the warm glow of home, safety, love, and hard-won peace. And in the nursery at the heart of it all, a duchess who'd once been a fugitive held her daughter close and smiled, knowing that the life she'd chosen was exactly the life she was meant to live. The end of one story, the beginning of countless others.